IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Wednesday, it's midweek rundown time, and we've got some jam-packed topics for you guys today. I think y'all might remember that dude, John Garcia, who's a national analyst at Rivals now, is going to join us because one of the topics we're going to discuss today is the new Rivals rankings update, which had some good stuff in there if you're a Notre Dame fan. And we'll dive into that. Then when John departs, I'm going to break down the Notre Dame running back room. Speaking of very talented players, we're going to talk about the Notre Dame running back room. And then we're going to have, of course, our Wednesday buy, sell, hold. Unfortunately, John is going to miss out on the buy, sell, hold, which is a fun segment. But I promise you all, I'm going to do my best to try to talk John into sticking around for a buy, sell, hold at some point in time this summer. I will do my best. But we're going to kick things off. Thanking John, obviously, to be with us today, guys. We're going to kick things off with some recruiting talk, but we're going to have some fun today, and I'm ready to rock and roll. As you guys remember, the buy sell holds are only for Irish Breakdown Premium members. If you want to get something in today, go ahead and throw a super chat, and we'll get that going as we dive into the buy sell hold. So, John Garcia, first and foremost, man, it's been a minute since you've been on the show. Thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely, thanks for having us.
Well, John, you've been busy. You and I have talked a lot. You've been busy the last week or so. You guys have been working on your rankings update here that you guys released today. You updated some 5 stars yesterday. Today you came out with the entire top 250. A lot of movement, not just with Notre Dame players, but a lot of movement as you guys kind of get to go through this, John. And I want to first kick things off with just a little bit of talk about, Rivals. Last time you were on here, you were a member of SI All-American and someone that we value. We still value you, and I just wanted to just remind people that John and I talked privately when he was kind of getting ready to make this move about how I saw Rivals as being an outlet that was trying to rebrand a little bit and get back to its roots as being a place that really focused on good, strong evaluations. And obviously hiring John was a big part of that. And so I think the Rivals people that knew me when I worked with Rivals would probably be a little surprised at how much praise I've thrown, but you guys have done some really good work, even though there's things that you and I know we disagree on, but I really respect the job you guys are doing. And over the last week, obviously, John, you guys got together and voila, a new Rivals 250.
Yeah, it's never easy. And I think this update in particular, Brian, is always creates the most fluidity, right? Because I think you're at the back end of catching up on the bulk of 2023 video. I mean, look, we're human. Some we see in small parts, some we dive deeper on, but we're at the back end of that, and it's really about fresh evaluations. What we saw in the spring, obviously, the camp and combine circuit is largely behind us outside of the college camps themselves. So a lot of this stuff is fresh and in person. Obviously, the Rivals Camp Series, a big part of that as well. So I think this update always creates a ton of movement ahead of obviously the bulk of the summer and eventually, the most important evaluation point, which is going to be the senior seasons for all these guys in the class of 25.
Well, John, you guys coming into the rankings update had this team in South Bend, Indiana, ranked number 1. That would be Notre Dame, obviously. You guys have them ranked number 1, which is partly because Notre Dame's class is bigger than most classes at this point in time. So that's obviously going to be part of it as well. But you guys also have more players that Notre Dame players ranked in your top 100. You guys have 2 guys that are borderline top 50, one that's in the top 50 and another that's very close to being a top 50. And, clearly you guys are very high on this Notre Dame class. And what's interesting is Notre Dame actually widened its lead with this new rankings update. Prior to the release, Notre Dame had 2,353 points on Rivals rankings. Now, if I believe when I checked a little bit ago, you guys are now have them at 2,416, which shows that overall there was a big jump from the Rivals rankings. And I'm just going to do a quick rundown here before we dive into specifics with John, but just to give you guys a sense of it, Notre Dame's highest ranked player in the new Rivals in the rankings is still Chris Burgess. You had him as your top guy before. Chris actually went up 2 spots. Duce Knight stayed put at number 52. And then there's a new member into the ranking. That is Will Black, who was previously an unranked player. He was a 4-star, but he was an unranked, meaning he wasn't in the top 250. And when you guys did rankings in going back to, he's been a 4-star here for a little bit, but he went from unranked outside the 250 to number 62. You also have Owen Strebig right behind him at number 64. So that's 4 guys in the top 65 right there. You have Anthony Sacca, number 5, at rank number 72. He's number 5 guy in the class, which is, Notre Dame fans are going to love that, because On 3 and 247 just dropped him down to a 3-star, which is, I don't even want to get into that. And I won't make you speak on it. Next is Ivan Taylor, number 102. After Ivan Taylor, you have Dallas Golden at number 154. Then you have Maddie Augustine at 224. So Maddie was actually a 3-star in the February ranking. Now he's not only a 4-star, but he jumps up to number 224. So all 3 O-line commits are now Rivals 250 players. Joseph Reif is number 237. Mark Zachary is number 247. And then a couple players dropped out. Cree Thomas, who was right at the bottom of the 250, dropped out. And then James Flanagan dropped out, which is actually he dropped out in February and hasn't jumped back in. So a couple that we could disagree on, but those are not in your region. So you're talking about a class now, John, with 22 players ranked, or 22 players committed, and 10 of them are in the Rivals 250. 5 of them are top 75 players. So clearly Rivals sees a lot of value in a lot of talent in this class. This isn't just, they signed 22. Like, remember when Texas Tech was number 1 a couple years ago for a while?
Yeah.
22 kids, and everybody next close was like 12. This isn't really that based on the Rivals rankings.
Yeah, and there's some controls put into that. I mean, the volume game, I think, was 5 years ago something that programs probably tried to do on purpose, like a Texas Tech. Hey, let's get some buzz. Let's have the number 1 class for a few minutes, and you understand why that was important, in a specific offseason. But there's a bit of a control. The top 20 players are ranked for each program, so that will make things closer as we get closer to actual National Signing Day come December. So that's a big part of it. But look, all these players are really good. I mean, I think there's only a few 3-stars on this verbal commitment list right now. And as you mentioned, Brian, a lot of these guys got the bump after seeing them in person. I think that's, again, why this update creates so much movement, because you're actually, live and in color seeing these guys move around, with those offensive linemen, seeing exactly how, quickly they can move laterally, how big they truly are on the hoof, because everyone is, listed a little bit bigger than they typically are. So those little things all sort of come together in this type of update. But there's no doubt this Notre Dame class has sort of what you would expect maybe in the trenches. We talked about that offensive line group, but then, great quarterback who's going to be one of the most fun evals from now through the month of January. And then some of these skill guys, particularly on defense, that really sort of show the strength and balance of what Notre Dame has been able to recruit and its usual national footprint, on top of that. So really fun class so far. And it just makes you wonder how many more spots might be left.
Well, right now between about 3 to 6 is sort of the number. And when you look at some of the guys on the board, I think that's a great segue, John. Look at some of the guys on the board. Derek Meadows ranks number 61 in your guys' ranking. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who will be visiting in June, is 28th on your list. Madden Fair-Ema, who's visiting this summer, ranked 57th on the list. And then Jameer Joseph, who's also ranking this summer, is ranked number 138. You guys don't have Jaydon Blair ranked in the top 250. I won't make you talk about that today since that's not your region. But there's a lot of impact talent there still on the board that Notre Dame is pursuing, which is why this is a year where I don't know that Notre Dame can stay number 1, and we don't need to get into that today because there's so much conjecture and all that. But this is one where you're not going to see them fall out of the top 10 like they have in the past, where they get up real high early, and then everybody catches up numbers-wise, and Notre Dame adds a couple 3-stars. There's some impact top-ranked players still on the board for Notre Dame, and some guys that I think could still move up on the rankings as you said, as you get out in the fall, you see certain guys, and I'll ask you about a couple of those guys today. But let's start off with Duce Knight right now, John, because I know you've seen him. You've seen Duce in person. Let's just kind of give your impression of what you see from Duce Knight. I see a kid with immense talent that still is a bit on the raw side. But if the light ever goes on for Duce, and I think that it will, that's a kid that's got immense tools. You guys at Rivals clearly see it the same way. He's your number 1 ranked dual threat quarterback, by the way. I forgot to mention that. He's ranked number 52 overall, but he's the number 1 dual threat quarterback in the class.
Yeah. I think you could make an argument he's got the biggest arm in the class, and it wouldn't really cause many people to push against it. Then you go to the frame. Well, I mean, he's a legitimate 6'5". He's going to add a ton of weight, so he's going to be one of the best looking quarterbacks in this class when all is said and done. But he's polarizing thereafter, and I think the last 2 times I saw him were evident of that. You know, I saw him in February at Under Armour Atlanta, cold day, indoor event, and he was frankly all over the place. The ball was sailing a little bit. The timing didn't look quite right, playing on that turf at Carrollton High School. And then we see him at the OT7 event in Florida, and dude's lighting it up down the field. I mean, just as pretty a deep ball as you can imagine from an anticipation and execution standpoint. He was fitting the ball in. He got into a rhythm. You know, he's a bit streaky from that position, which is not the greatest compliment. But when he got going, you could see it. And everyone's like, hey, who's this kid? You know, he commands that type of attention. So I think that's who he is. He's polarizing. It depends on when you see him. I wasn't at the Elite 11 workout he went to, but everyone there said he was fantastic, right? So it just depends on when you get that in-person evaluation of a Duce Knight, because when you pair it with his junior season, also kind of chaotic, right? Transferred high schools. He was up in Tennessee at Lipscomb, went back down to George County in Mississippi. A lot to ask of a junior quarterback trying to learn 2 systems or execute 2 systems during the same year with all the logistical changes, and not to mention just the pressure of being a coveted recruit at the quarterback position, making such a high profile move. So I think stability is going to be key for him. And now he's working with QB Country, which obviously has a great resume of development. And he said that, you know, he said, hey, I just need to be steady with it. You know, and I think that's one of my favorite things about Duce is he's not looking at these things and saying, oh man, y'all are hating on me as the number 52 player. He's looking at it as, man, imagine what I can do once I'm stable, once I can get through these next few stages compared to guys who have been, you know, classically trained and groomed quarterbacks from years and years ago, like a Julian Lewis, like a Bryce Underwood in this class. So he's really the counter to a lot of those guys in terms of development, which again, when you go back to rankings, why does he rank so high? We're talking about the long game here, you know, and the physical traits are undeniable. The kid seems incredibly coachable. So all of those things factor into the evaluation. And he's a guy that, again, depending on when you see him, you might say this is the best passer in the country. And then another time you might say, hey, he's got 2-3 years before it's going to be his time. And there's nothing wrong with that in the long game because, again, you're projecting sort of the middle to back end of these kids' collegiate careers and where they might fall at the end of that process. Not easy, certainly not linear in a simple equation, but you can understand why there's both high expectations for Duce Knight and a wide variety of opinions at the same time.
Well, John, I think that's where evaluating quarterbacks has gotten even tougher in recent years because so many of these kids are being groomed at a very young age to be highly ranked guys. And so, you know, I see certain guys, and I won't name names and drag you into that conversation, but I'm like, you know, that guy's a great quarterback today, but I don't know if he's going to be there in 3 years. And then Duce is sort of like the old school quarterback evaluation, right? Where these kids would be multi-sport stars. Duce runs track. He plays basketball. The vast majority of these kids that are big-time quarterbacks are one-sport guys. Because in the offseason, they're doing nothing but quarterback training. Well, Duce is an old school kid. He's a kid that we used to evaluate when we first got into this, which is that he's just a star athlete. He's the best player on their basketball team. He's a guy that goes out there and runs track, and he's winning track meets and things along those lines. And it's funny, as you know, you talk about the same thing you shows up on film. Like when he's on, he's phenomenal. When he's not on, you say this is a kid that needs a lot of work. And I like the fact that not only does Duce not say, well, hey, you know, oh, you're hating on me, I'm this, and this. Duce also doesn't say, well, I'm top 50. I don't have to put in that work. You know, and I think the other thing too,
he wants to go out and compete every time.
Yeah. Right. And that's why he's on all these. That's why he shows up randomly at this event that Notre Dame had or not Notre Dame had, but like Riley Leonard and CJ Carr were down in Riley Leonard's hometown in Alabama with 6 Notre Dame receivers. And guess who else was there? Duce Knight with Phillip Rivers putting in work. You know, I mean, that's the kind of kid he is. And you know, the other part of it too, John, is when you're evaluating all these events, one of the best parts of his game, you don't even get to see because these are drop back and throwing events. And so I think that's good for Duce because that allows him to focus on the part of his game that needs the most development. And so I think those are positives for him. So we'll kind of see how that development goes. And the one thing that's very unique about Notre Dame this year, John, is they're having a lot more impact in the South with not just numbers, but impact talent. And there's obviously some skill kids down there that we'll talk about. And one of the biggest pickups, in my opinion, he's my number one ranked player in the class overall, is Dallas Golden, who was a dynamic player. You guys have him ranked a lot lower than I have him. And we've talked about why. So I just want to give people a glimpse into sort of how the process works and also the opportunities that are there in front of Dallas to actually go up in the rankings.
Yeah, well, look, first of all, it's the long game, right? We're going to do this thing through January of 2025. That'll be the final update. And we just talked about how so many in-person impressions have shifted the conversation with some guys, right or wrong, up or down. Well, Dallas Golden, private school kid, very much to himself, very much about Friday nights and the actual game of football, which is funny as we talk about football, the actual full padded 11 on 11 situation, which means we don't see him. We don't see him in these settings. And that's not a knock on him. Certainly it's not something anybody's going to hold against him. But if we're seeing in-person impressions on, hundreds of kids and he's just not one of them, the opportunity for him to move up following a dominant and do it all 2023 season doesn't necessarily sit there. And that's partially on us. We didn't get up to Tampa and scout him in person during Berkeley Prep's state championship run. We did have eyes on him at the state title game where everyone saw him do it all for Berkeley Prep to upset Miami Norland back in December. But since that point, and he moved up every ranking update, at that point, we hadn't seen anything new. So he's going to stay in neutral in that 150 range until we do get eyeballs on him. And luckily for us, he is signed up for the Rivals 5-star event in Jacksonville at the end of June, where we're going to get, obviously, a great evaluation on him because there's no 3-stars invited. So only blue chip recruits, only big-time receivers. So we'll see Dallas be able to go against some of the very best in this class. And I think that's huge for him, one, because we're the only ones ranking him at corner. And I think when we talk about moving on a prospect, we just talked about it with Duce Knight. If it's a premium position guy, QB, OT, defensive end, corner, etc., we really need eyeballs on him to make that call and make that move. So we feel good about cornerback because he's frankly one of the best athletes in America, regardless of sport, regardless of class in the football ranks. He's a freaky athlete. I don't think it takes a whole lot of expertise to acknowledge that. Just watch his tape. He's playing quarterback, running back, wing, receiver, safety, corner, nickel. He's doing everything but putting his hand in the dirt on offense and defense, and he's doing it with relatively easy looking success, which is always a sign of dominance and a high ceiling athlete. But when we talk about corner, we want to see a little bit more of it in action. And I think obviously we're going to get that in Jacksonville and sort of lock in that projection. Because I do think two things can slow down, I guess, your upward trajectory as a prospect. One of them is obviously a lack of evaluation. And we take ownership of that relative to Dallas Golden, but also position questions. And I think that part of it, because he's so versatile, it's almost a detractor in this stage of the game because we're still trying to figure out, are we sure about corner? What about safety? What about wide receiver? He's got offensive scholarship offers to his name. So obviously we'll see what happens at Notre Dame. He's certainly locked in and solid with the Irish. But for now, we're banking on corner. Just too much juice not to put him at that position to represent the best on defense and obviously combat the best that he'll see on offense come Saturday. So obviously highly anticipating that evaluation we're going to get in person. Everything else on tape is check marked with Dallas. It's just that positional projection and obviously that fresh good on good eval that we're going to get here in a few weeks.
Another big-time player from the state of Florida that Notre Dame has landed in this class is Ivan Taylor, obviously son of Ike Taylor. This is a guy that Notre Dame got early in the process and is unlike most Florida commits that Notre Dame gets in that he is a public school kid. Now, obviously, they have Davion Dixon committed, who's also to public school, but Davion started at a private school when he committed Notre Dame. I believe he's still at a private school. So, this is one of those ones that's kind of showing the Marcus Freeman and the Mike Mickens effect. And, well, actually – Ivan wasn't actually initially recruited by Mike Mickens, but this is showing the Marcus Freeman effect that they're not just going into Florida and getting the private school kids. They're now dipping down there for, the big time football players that are all around. Let's talk about Ivan Taylor and what you see him adding to the Notre Dame defense. Because, John, you and I have talked about this for years, man. Like, these are the kind of athletes that Notre Dame needs to get more and more of, and Marcus Freeman's having a big impact on them, getting more and more of them.
Yeah, I think with Golden, we talked about that versatility and how it's slowing him down now. That's going to help when he gets to South Bend. With Taylor, we see it and we know that's going to help him at the next level, whether it's as a safety, which is where we have him ranked, or as a nickel, which is a position hopefully at Rivals we will rank one day. I see a ton of upside with Ivan. He's got true safety size and instincts that maybe you would expect given his NFL legacy status, but the fluidity we also get with him is probably what pushes him to be ranked as high as he is at this point. This is just one of those players that you can assign something to, and they'll go out and execute it. Hey, this team's got a great slot receiver. I need you to man up against them. Sorry, it's tough. They got a two-way go every play, but go figure it out, and he can. Or you say, hey, this team's got great, a tight end and a great vertical game. Go play classic free safety, show off that range, and make plays on the football. Cool, he can do that too. Or you could say, hey, big physical receiver on the outside, just go take him away. And Ivan can go do that as well. And I think he played all three of those spots in the spring game where he really flashed up at West Orange. I think he had an injury earlier in the spring, so he's another we didn't get as much fresh eyes on, but he's one we've seen a little bit more than Dallas over the last year or so to feel that much more comfortable with as a borderline top 100 type of guy. But I think in college, he's your nickel, move him around type of player, depending on your scheme, depending on your opponent, even at different times. So curious to see where he settles at positionally, and ultimately for him, where his body fills out at. A great looking kid today, but one you could also see adding some weight, and that could obviously influence where he lines up there at the end of the day. But again, high floor guy, high skill guy that we have seen at the high level in some of these tougher spots that secondary prospects are put in.
John, let's talk about that defensive back class. You've had a chance to check all the guys out. You and I have talked about Creed Thomas in the past, and Ethan Long's another kid that you have graded as a 4-star player. So all 5 secondary players are. Let me just check real quick just to make sure that Ethan Long is still a 4-star on your guys' board, but he has been. So I don't want to speak out of turn and get that one incorrect. But so I'm just pulling up the Rivals ranking here. Oh, it looks like, come on now.
Yeah, he's a 5'8".
Okay, so he's a 4-star kid, and then you also have Creed Thomas as a 4-star kid. So Creed's grade didn't grade. There's just some other guys that you've seen, because Creed hasn't done any camps either that are going to cause guys to jump. So you got all 5 guys ranked as 4-star players. I want you to get your thoughts on this Notre Dame secondary class now that they've got Mark Zachary added. I know you had a chance to evaluate him, so we'll just look at it as it is today, and then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, about what if they add another player to that mix.
Well, it's a heck of a group. Everyone's big. Everyone has great ball skills, and I think those are really the 2 areas where you start to look at modernization at the position. I think versatility is another part of it. We talked about that with the 2 Floridians that are on board right now, but I'm really intrigued by the size, the length in particular, and the ball skills of these guys, because, we used to talk about bringing in a secondary class where you slot guys in kind of before they get there. This guy's for sure a safety. This guy maybe can play some corner. Now you're just like, hey, bring in lengthy, rangy players who can make plays on the football, period. I think like Zachary in particular, not the biggest guy, maybe not the fastest guy, but you see the instincts and some polish in his game that, when combined with his length and combined with his ball skills, all of a sudden make you think, hey, this is a guy who could probably line up on the boundary and hold his own for years to come. I was watching his tape today, and my favorite play was a mistake that he made. He was in bail coverage, bail technique, which for those watching, basically you're taking off at the snap of the football, almost like a wide receiver, right? You're trying to mirror that wide receiver, which puts you in a good spot for vertical balls, but maybe not in a great spot for anything short to intermediate. Well, he false stepped. He took off a little bit too early, but he had the wherewithal to slow down right at the goal line, which is such a mistake most defensive backs don't make, because they continue running into the back of the end zone, and then obviously you're giving up more space. But then he speed turns, which is not something you see a lot in high school, meaning instead of stopping and turning his body and redirecting, he just flips his head around to the front shoulder of the wide receiver, and he's able to break on the football right at the goal line on a ball that, when the QB threw it, look like an easy touchdown. It's a couple minutes into his tape there. So
John, actually, we did a breakdown of him on Saturday, so the fans know exactly the play you're talking about, because I rewound that back. Like, I don't think you all understand
really,
how rare this play is, like how hard it is for a high school kid to make this play that way, to not only flip his hips, not only then to get re-engaged, but then to also find the football.
yeah.
On
So
that
like
particular play.
he bails the wrong way exactly, and then it somehow found the football on a quick outcut right there at the pylon. So just just advanced type stuff there. So I love that in this evaluation, to where again it's not a 4'3" guy at 6'2", but this is a guy who's going to make up for some of that with the combination of instincts and technique that he's already got sort of in his bag. And he's he's a 6-footer himself, so not exactly small on his end as well. So I think this class has nice balance with some of the bigger guys combining with some of the ones we've talked a little bit more about today, corner relative to safety. And obviously there's still some other talent out there that they could potentially add to it. So I like this group plenty. I'm going to back those Floridians that are already in that class that are frankly going to move up. I mean, look, Dallas Golden's going to move up barring like a huge dud in Jacksonville and a bigger dud his senior season. So he's got a lot of chances to go and cement status as more than likely a top 100 guy, and maybe even a guy come January who we're talking about as a 5-star. It would not surprise me with the raw talent we see with Dallas if he ascends into that status. So you've got your headliners that are your freaky guys that will figure it out one day, and then you've got your higher floor guys who today are kind of closer to that endpoint. So that's a good mix to have in the secondary, where we're seeing the need for those guys to step up and play that much sooner because of the pass first nature of the sport we all love.
We'll wrap up with this, John. There's a potential for one more kid to be added to the class. We've talked about a long time on our podcast, on our board, on our premium board. Dropped a huge intel piece on the board last night that people can go look at if you're a premium member. And a guy that Notre Dame has been in a great place with for a long time is a kid out of North Carolina named Jaydon Blair. You had a chance to, I mean, I know you've seen him before, but you had a chance to reacquaint yourself with him as you prepare for this show. What is this? What's going on with this class, John, in your view, if they add Jaydon Blair to it? Because I look, and I'll ask it this way. Obviously, Notre Dame is trying to close the gap on the top programs. They're trying to close the gap on, Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and those type of teams, where they not only are competing with them on the recruiting trail, but getting the talent on the team that you need to beat those football teams on the field. They've come close, almost beat Georgia twice, almost beat Ohio State, but almost doesn't count, right? What does Jaydon Blair add to this class? What would it mean for this class? And do you see this DB class being one that says, look, Notre Dame had a great secondary in 2023. This group, along with what they've gotten recently, gives them a chance to keep that rolling in the future. Do you see it that way, especially if they had a guy like Jaydon Blair?
I do, because he's really the only type, 6'4", what is he, 190 or so. He's the only body type that really doesn't sit in the class today in the secondary. He's a monster back, right? This is a new position. This is a new evaluation. This is like these hybrid tight ends, these Brock Bauer kind of guys that we just don't see all the time. So we got to try to figure out the value of this position, because it's something that's not going away. So to slow down these kind of freaky tight ends, you need this monster back. Is he a safety? Is he an outside backer? We're not sure, but what we see on tape says this is the style that can slow down this player and assist you in the run game, and potentially earlier in his career assist you in the deep passing game as well. I see a control with Blair that I really like. We talk about leverage a lot in the secondary, and it's typically, coverage leverage, where we're talking about maintaining your side of the football, staying in phase, etc. Well, this guy's got leverage whether he's covering passes or coming down to fill the runs, meaning he's not overstepping. He's not overrunning his target, which means he's got an understanding of the kind of range he has as a big athlete, and also an understanding of the game where, hey, this hole's opening up. I need to throttle down and slow down here to make this play at the line of scrimmage, as opposed to overrunning it and you get cut back on and the running back's going 80 yards for a touchdown. So he's got this maturity to his game, which is, again, something congruent with a lot of these Notre Dame commits, right? There's a maturity that is clearly evident on tape, and I'm sure in person with Blair, that I really like. it probably lends to more versatility. It probably lends to more coachability at the next level. But yeah, this is the kind of guy, and we see these great teams have these players, right? I don't know if Styles is a bad word on this podcast, given his
No,
history,
no.
but that type of player is something that most defenses need at the high end level. And I see some of that with Blair. I think he's a guy who can rush the passer if you need him, but more than likely he's going to be able to sit in the box or even play over the top of it and help you with the bigger, more physical mismatches that, again, you're going to see with this type of schedule that Notre Dame's always got to play against. It's going to be a Big Ten ACC hybrid schedule, and you're going to see a lot of these freaky type of athletes on the outside. So I think Blair has some ability to combat that, and at a worst case scenario, throw some weight on the guy and say, hey, now you can be a modern linebacker and play in space, and probably be a higher value guy come Sunday. So, he's one that's very easy to like on tape for sure. And when you think about how he fits into the class, he could be that missing piece that makes it, in the running for best secondary class in the country when we get closer to the end of the cycle.
John, you guys aren't the only ones that are having trouble evaluating these kind of kids. I mean, that's exactly why Kyle Hamilton fell to 14. I mean, you could argue Kyle Hamilton is one of the 2 or 3 best players in that draft class. He
Yeah,
falls only to
redraft,
14.
right?
Why?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Because, well, even coming in, there's a lot of people that thought he was a top 5 player in that draft class, but he falls 14. Why? Because people are like, well, I don't know what he's going to play. He didn't run a great
He's
40
so
time.
big. Right.
Right. What's he going to do? And then the Ravens are like, we'll take him because we know how to win with guys like this, and teams that are able to, like Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa had a little bit of that issue. Like, he's not a linebacker. He's not a safety. He falls away to 50, and the Browns are like, we'll take him and turn him into an impact player at the next level. So it is part of that evaluation and you've been banging on this drum for years when it comes to the nickel position. It used to be the nickel position was considered like, well, that's your number 3 corner. And when you have to go nickel, you put your third best. Now it's like, no, like Lorenzo, what was a guy? Denzel Ward got drafted in the top 5 as a nickel corner.
As a nickel,
I mean, the way teams play spread off, right? The way teams play spread offenses now, that guy has to be good. And if he's not, if he's just your number 3 corner, you're going to get beat there. And that's something that hurt Notre Dame against Ohio State last year. They put Emeka Egbuka in the slot, and he's matched up against Notre Dame safeties and their nickel, Thomas Harper, because Notre Dame doesn't have the depth at corner yet to really put that type of impact player there. And 4th and 7 on the final drive, what happens? They put Emeka Egbuka against Thomas Harper, and Ohio State's going to win that match every single time. And they put Emeka up a seam route against a Notre Dame safety, and they're going to win that every time. And that's where Notre Dame is like, look, we've got to make sure we're getting impact players. And this type of safety, this type of guy is also part of that, because you're seeing more of these basketball player type of guys. And Jaydon's a very good basketball player that are starting to play football. And they're like, hey, there's more of a need for that. And it's just, the evaluation services and the NFL scouting have to catch up to those type of guys, because there's no need to do it until someone like a Kyle Hamilton comes along and is like, no, you don't have to put 30 pounds on me like you did 20 years ago and turn me into a linebacker. I'm a safety, and Jaydon Blair brings that kind of guy. John, can I ask you about one more guy here real quick, just briefly?
Yeah,
you okay if I ask you about a 26 kid?
Do it.
Obviously, Notre Dame is pushing hard for a quarterback in the 2026 class, but young man by the name of Noah Grubbs. I know you've had a chance to see Noah a little bit. Just what have your impressions of so far? Obviously, 2 more years of high school left, a lot of development left, but what are your early impressions of Noah Grubbs?
Yeah, big kid, huge arm. I mean, that's really the first thing that you get, whether on tape or in person, with Noah. As you get a little bit more, intimate with him as a scout, confident kid. He's got some CJ Carr kind of like quiet confidence. Like, I know I got it. I might not yell it at you, but I know I got it, which is something you want at that spot. Obviously, you talk about maturity and the need to look heavy. Quarterback is where that conversation begins. So obviously, a kid incredibly productive. By the time he's done, he'll be a 4-year high school starter. You love that. Playing Orlando area competition, you love that as well. But 2 things I really love about Noah Grubbs, and those rankings come out next week, by the way. Yes,
you had him 44 before.
He'll be in that same range again. 2 things I love about him. One, he knows that he's looked at as a pocket guy. So he has been vehemently working to not only add bulk, which is something that's going to come, but to add some of those movement skills. But two, he's already really good in the pocket. You can be athletic in the pocket without being a great athlete or without being a dual threat. Like Duce Knight, great in the pocket, but yeah, he's going to run for 30 yards if he's blitzed the wrong way and reads it. Noah Grubbs won't do that, but he can avoid that guy and then go deliver a strike and reset, or use some of the modern off-platform stuff and drop that arm angle and fire the football there. That's where the natural arm talent comes into play as well. So he's a kid who is confident yet knows where maybe some of the weaknesses are, really working to combat that while being just a air it out, productive high school quarterback that has really, put a whole school on his back. Again, similar to CJ Carr, where, normally we don't talk about Lake Mary High School, not a ton of talent, nice area, etc. Well, he has elevated that program to where they're making deep playoff runs with guys who aren't Saturday players around him. So that's another great sign for the trajectory of Noah Grubbs. And you talk to folks in Orlando, they say he's going to be maybe the best quarterback to come out of the state ever. That's obviously heavy. We know Lamar Jackson's in the NFL right now. We know Florida is getting better at the QB position, but there is a true buzz around Noah Grubbs. So fascinated to see where he ends up. Obviously, Notre Dame is in the thick of it right now, and he'd be a great, I would say, ideal early get in the 26th class, because he's the type that, again, with that confidence, that maturity, he's going to go out and get you some other guys once he's on board.
Well, John, obviously, thank you so much for joining us today. Y'all, folks, head over to rivals.com. I have said it with John not on the show, and I'll say it again now. There's been a lot of changes with the recruiting services in recent years. The addition of On3, a lot of changes at 247. ESPN is doing whatever ESPN does. I've said it before. I'll say it now. With what Rivals is doing, John, I put a lot more faith in what you guys are doing from a ranking standpoint there, best. And it's not just because my guy right here is now part of that. I really respect the fact that you guys are making a concerted effort to say, let's get this right. If that means we got to be slow and not reactionary to a kid because of one thing or because of what other people are doing, that's fine. We're going to do it right. And I respect that. And that's when, John, you and I have discussed this for years. So we know, hey, we don't always have to agree. But if I respect the work and I respect the process, then we can have a conversation about it. And that's what I really like about what you guys are doing. So keep it up. Hope you guys keep rolling, keep making those changes, and keep adding. So you guys got my guy Sam Spiegelman on board now. So
Yes,
really enjoy what you guys are doing. And I look forward to having you on again, man. Really appreciate you.
Sounds good, Brian. Thanks for having me. Good catching up.
Yep. So, folks, that is John Garcia talking about the Notre Dame rankings for the 2025 class. Just a couple little notes from that, just to put a bow on this. Notre Dame had 10 of their 22 commits were in the Rivals 250. If you want a comparison and you look at 247 Sports rankings, now, again, you've got to look at 247 Sports' own rankings, not the composite, but their own rankings. I believe they had 8 of Notre Dame's players just as 4 stars. That's it. Only 4 stars. Only 8 were 4 stars. Rivals has 10 in their top 250 and 5 in their top 100. And then there's another player in Ivan Taylor who's at 102, just outside. So Rivals is clearly very high on this Notre Dame class, and I think rightfully so. They're high on this Notre Dame class. So check that out, rivals.com. Their new rankings came out today. I have a breakdown on the Irish the Irish Breakdown site, the Athlon site, which I've got to get moved over here. Right now, irishbreakdown.com does not link to that site. That will be done by the end of the day. But if you check out our Athlon site, you click on. Actually, I'll put our new site here on the board. It's at Athlon Sports. It's still Irish Breakdown, but it's now at Athlon Sports. I have that article there. You can check that out. Bookmark that. And, of course, it's on the premium message board, breaking it all down. And then, of course, go to rivals.com. Check out the whole rankings, because they got some very interesting rankings. And some I like and some I don't like, but I respect the process that's going into it and what they're doing over at Rivals. So that's going to do it for this section. Next, I'm going to talk running backs. But before we do, folks, do me a solid. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. Give us a 5-star review. And if you've not done so, you have totally missing out on the intel piece that we dropped last night. Drop some team nuggets, drop some recruiting nuggets. The people that are on the board are going to tell you There's a lot of great content, but man, that intel piece last night was very well received, I believe, by the people who are premium members. A lot of good stuff in there, so definitely going to want to check that out as well, including the potential of a pending commitment change somewhere. So you'll get to check that out again at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So let's dive into part 2 of today's show, and we're going to talk about the running backs, and we're kind of wrapping up our sort of our state of the program, state of the union type look at each position. And obviously running back is the next position we're going to discuss, because this is a position that has really intrigues me. And it's one of those ones that I point to. I did my rant yesterday about, the narratives around Notre Dame that used to just really tick me off. And one of them is running back. And we as a fan base sometimes get really, and this is true for all fan bases, you don't want to bash your team, the team you love. You don't want to do that. But we have to be honest and be able to say, hey, look, this is just not good enough. And running back was one of those positions for a time where you just would hear people say, well, you can't recruit big-time running backs at Notre Dame. Kids like that don't want to go to school. I'm like, well, it wasn't a problem for Lou Holtz. They'd recruit like 6 great running backs a year and move them to other positions. And then sometimes they'd end up going there. And then all of a sudden, you continue to have running back recruiting issues. And all of a sudden you get a Julius Jones and a Tony Driver who are highly ranked guys. And then you go through some other down periods. And all of a sudden Charlie Weiss shows up and he gets James Aldridge in one class. He gets Armando Allen and Robert Hughes in another class, and Jonas Gray in another class, and then he gets Theo Riddick and Sear Wood, and you're like, well, why this guy can recruit running backs? Tony Alford obviously had some success recruiting running backs in 2015 alone, or 2013. They got 2 top 100 kids from Florida, and Greg Bryant and Torian Folson. 2 years later, he gets Josh Adams and Dexter Williams, and then recruiting a running back kind of went down big time and struggled. And there was the conversations about, oh, you can't recruit big-time running backs. And we made all these excuses again about why they didn't. Lance Taylor shows up, and he starts to turn things around. Notre Dame gets Kyron Williams. The next year, they get Chris Tyree. Then they get a commitment from Logan Diggs and Aldrick Estime. Then he leaves. Notre Dame lands Jadarian Price in the 2022 class. Then Dylan McCullough shows up, and he adds Jabron Payne to that class. And then he adds Jeremiah Lovin to 23 class, the 24 class. You add Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams. And lo and behold, just like that, top running backs miraculously, for no reason whatsoever, decided they wanted to come to Notre Dame again. And now we're looking at a situation where Notre Dame has lost in a 2-year stretch. They've lost Logan Diggs, Chris Tyree, and Aldrick Estime from the running back room. After 2022, they lost Chris Tyree, who converted to receiver. They lost Logan Diggs, who transferred out. Aldrick Estime after 2023 and a monster season in 2023. He goes to the NFL a year early, gets drafted in, was it the 5th round by the Denver Broncos after just a brilliant 2023 campaign. And now Notre Dame is sitting here saying, well, what are you going to do now? How are you going to replace a guy like Aldrick Estime? And the changes that we saw that were first implemented by Lance Taylor, got to give Coach Taylor his respects for the job he did. He's now the head coach at Western Michigan. Got to give him respect for the job he did starting this process. And Chip Long played a role in that as well. And Tommy Rees played a role in that as well. Tommy was very instrumental in getting Logan Diggs to come to Notre Dame, for example. Chip Long was very instrumental in getting Chris Tyree to come to Notre Dame. So it was a team effort, which it needs to be. But that staff showed, hey, we can start to recruit this well. And then Dylan McCullough's taken it to a whole nother level in what he's done from a coaching and development, or a coaching and recruiting standpoint. So Notre Dame enters the 2024 season looking at the running back position, saying, hey, this is an area where there's some question marks from a proven production standpoint, but there's loads of talent. And the nice thing is we're not sitting here trying to convince you guys, not that we ever would. If a position group lacked talent, I would tell you it lacked talent. But we could sit here and spin it and say, oh, hey, this guy's better than a lot of people think. And I know the recruiting rankings say this, but no, he really actually is a good player, I promise, even though he's a 3-star consensus. And and then we have to kind of have that conversation, and you kind of got to show me. But when you look at the group that they have now, this is a group of players that not only do we think are very talented players, but these are guys that came to Notre Dame with very, very high and impressive recruiting profiles as well. And if you're someone who obsesses over recruiting rankings, and I know some of you are, understandably, I get it, But if you're one of those people, you're going to look at this running back room and say, this is a pretty loaded group of players. And let's just go through the recruiting profile. Jadarian Price was a consensus 4-star recruit, was ranked as high as number 166 by one of the recruiting services. Irish Breakdown had him as a top 100 recruit. Jeremiah Love comes in the next year. He is a consensus top 100 player, or he was a consensus. Rivals had him outside the top 100. His lowest ranking was 129. His highest was 79. 3 of the 4 services had him as a top 100 player. Irish Breakdown, I believe we had him as a top 50 player. Let me just pull that up, but I believe that my ranking for him was as a top 50 player. I don't want to say that for sure and then make it seem like we ranked him higher than we did. So let me just pull up Jeremiah here. So yes, I did have him as a top 50 player overall coming out of that class. In the 2023 class, I had him as the number 2 offensive player in the class behind only Charles Jagasaw, who I had as a 5-star. You look at the next, and then also in the 22 class, you had Jabron Payne, who had multiple injuries coming out of high school, but still was ranked as a 4-star recruit by 3 of the 4 services and was ranked number 269 overall by ESPN, despite being injured most of his last 2 years of high school. Keegan Young comes out as monster sophomore and junior season, finished his career as a consensus 4-star recruit, ranked number 79 overall by On3. Aeneas Williams also had a phenomenal high school career, consensus 4-star recruit, ranked as the number 150 player in the country by Rivals. So this isn't just a group of players that we have to convince ourselves are good. The recruiting services agree with that, which is not a rare thing. Now, I'm not saying that them ranking them that high means they're good. I'm trying to speak to both sides. There's a lot of people that say, hey, I don't care about rankings. I just want to know the film, the production, the talent. We'll talk about that. But there is a part of the audience that does care about the rankings aspect of it. And when you look at this running back room, this group is going to satisfy those group of people as well. When you look at it and say, hey, does Notre Dame really have the profile to go out and replace a guy like Audric Estime and potentially be just as good as you were last year, if not better? Not necessarily saying anyone's going to be as good as Audric. Maybe somebody does break out. But as a group, it's going to be an even more impactful and productive group based on the talent that Notre Dame has coming back. And talent's one thing, but you've got to go out and prove it. And that's another part of this that I do believe when I look at this group, there can be some confidence from fans to say, hey, look, this isn't just about a group of players that are talented or about potential, but they're not actually good football players. This is also a group that we've seen do some things, and that's part of it as well. And running back is one of those positions that inherently running back and receiver on offense, but even more so running back. And I've made this case over and over again. I don't really care what your experience level is at running back. It's not a position you need to continue to I don't know. You need 500 snaps or 1,000 snaps of experience before you can really feel comfortable. This is one of those positions where the talent still takes over a lot of the time. It is still very much that type of position group where, yes, it'd be nice if guys were also experienced, but as Audric Estime proved in 2022, look, yeah, experience is nice, but if you're talented, you can go out and play. And we saw that with Audric in 2022. Played 7 snaps had 7 carries in 2021. Comes out in 2022 and rushes for over 900 yards. In fact, I think Audric and Logan Diggs combined for less than 300 yards rushing as true freshmen in 2021. They combined for that. Let me pull up the specific number so I can give you guys the exact number, but I believe it was like 292, something along those lines. Let me just look that up here real quick. So that year, Logan Diggs had 230 yards rushing. Audric Estime that season had 60. So it's 290 rushing yards is all they had in 2023. Jeremiah Love by himself had 385 last year. So when you talk about, proven production, we've already seen that. And then what did those two young players do? They went from 290 combined yards as freshmen in 2021 to 1,742 combined yards and 15 combined touchdowns in 2022. So you actually have more experience and proven production coming back at running back in 2023 or 24 than you had going into the 2022 season when Notre Dame had an outstanding backfield with Chris Tyree being the veteran, and then, of course, Logan Diggs and Audric Estime. Here's another little interesting tidbit for you. And I believe I've mentioned this on the show today. I know I've mentioned it on the message board before, but I believe I mentioned it on the show. When Jaydon Price was a freshman early enrollee, I had a football coach at Notre Dame tell me this. He's not at Notre Dame anymore, but I had a Notre Dame football coach tell me this, that if he didn't get hurt, Jaydon Price might have started for Notre Dame in 2022 at running back. That's how good he was in the spring. At the very least, he would have played a ton. So you're talking about a group of players that are incredibly talented, and there's a lot of depth of talent. And when you look at the production and the returning production at the position, and you talk about, okay, well, do they have the experience to step into that role? I think that's another area where I believe that this group has what it takes to make an impact early on. Is it's not just about talent, it's not just about experience. You want that blend. And so while this group is not a group where you can say, hey, look, they were featured backs, they know what it's like to be the bell cow back. No one has to be that this season. But you do have a group of players that played a lot of football last season. These aren't guys that only played mop-up minutes. I mean, Jaydon Price, as a kick returner, had one of the biggest moments of the USC game. The Trojans had just made it 31-20. Still some time left for the Heisman Trophy winner to go out and make some noise if they can get a stop on defense. But the defense never got a chance to make that stop because Jaydon Price took a kickback, over 90 yards for a touchdown and put that game away. So, but even then, you have some high leverage situations, but you also have a group of guys that have played a good amount of football. So even with Audric Estime last year being a part of your running back room, when you look at the Notre Dame running backs last season and you look at the amount of snaps that they had and the opportunities they had, Audric last season played 388 snaps last year for Notre Dame. If you look at the three returners that played last year, that would be Gi'Bran Payne, Jaydon Price, and Jeremiah Love. They combined for 414 snaps last season. So again, these are not young men that went into last season with no experience, no opportunities, no playing time, and now you're just hoping and wishing upon a star that they can be productive players. This is a group of players that when you look at their production last year, Jeremiah Love had 385 yards, Jaydon Price had 272 yards rushing, and Gi'Bran Payne had 168 yards rushing, which means the Notre Dame running backs returned 825 yards of rushing coming back, and they had over 180 receiving yards, which means as a unit, they had over 1,000 yards of offense last season. We also saw this running back room playing together in a bowl game last year. They played together in the matchup against Oregon State, and they went out last season and performed very well. Obviously, Jeremiah Love had a very impressive touchdown catch in that game. He wasn't really dynamic as a runner, rushed for about 36 yards, I believe. But Jaydon Price went off in that game and went over for 100 yards. And when we interviewed him this offseason, and Sean Stiers had an article about this a couple weeks ago, he talked about how he felt he left a lot of yards in the field. He missed some holes, missed some cuts, and could have had an even more impactful game for Notre Dame in that game. So you saw two running backs combined for 145 yards in a game replacing, actually, and if you add Gi'Bran Payne's production, it's 169 yards rushing in that game just from that group alone. Plus you had the touchdown catch from Jeremiah Love. So this is a group with a lot of talent, a lot of ability, and Notre Dame is in a great place. And on top of that trio of Jeremiah Love, Jaydon Price, and Gi'Bran Payne, you welcome in two freshmen that flat out can help you as rookies if the need is there, and Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams. So you're talking about a five-man group of running backs that is absolutely loaded. And there's depth. There's a lot of different types of talent. There is some experience. Again, this is a group that had over 1,000 yards of offense last season. And I'm not even talking about, the kick return production. I'm simply talking about the production they had as offensive players. Because if you look at Jaydon Price last season, he had let's see here, 337 yards of offense. But Jaydon had 681 all-purpose yards last season when you look at the kick return production that he had last year. And in fact, when you look at Notre Dame's kick return production last season, Jaydon had 344 yards, but Jeremiah Love and Gi'Bran Payne also combined for 83 yards. So you're talking about a unit that's over 1,500 yards of total yards last season, rushing, receiving, and returns. And all three of them had, I believe, a receiving touchdown last season. So this is a group with a lot more proven production and a lot more proven aspects than what I think people may think about this group. So certainly something to be excited about, and then the question is, okay, but can they do what Audric did last year? Well, the answer is no. They can't do what Audric did last year. They're different backs than Audric, and you're not going to ask them to be those type of players. What you have to do as a Notre Dame coaching staff is say, listen, we did this with Audric because that's who Audric was. That's what he was great at. The key for Mike Denbrock and Dylan McCullough, and to a degree, Joe Rudolph is going to say, okay, but what are the kids we have now? What are they good at? And can they fit the things that we would like to do as a program, running the football, catching the football? And you're going to see a tailoring, ideally, a tailoring to what these players can do. And sometimes that means, certain players are going to focus more on like we saw this in the past where, one of my frustrations in 2022 was they just kind of ran the same stuff no matter who was in the game. It was duo, 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 inside zone, duo, duo, counter. And then you'd put Chris Tyree in the game, and you're asking Chris Tyree to run the exact same plays that you ran with Logan Diggs and Audric Estime, who are much bigger players. One thing that Mike Denbrock did a good job of at LSU the last couple of years, in my opinion, was he tailored his run game to the specific strengths of his players. So when Logan Diggs was in the game, they'd run a lot of duo. When other guys in the game, a little shiftier, they'd run some more counter, some more zone stuff. And then with Logan Diggs, it was duo and inside zone. It was get him downhill. That's what Logan was good at, get him downhill. And that's certainly something that he brings to the table. So I do think you have a coaching staff that has proven that, hey, we can use guys different ways. And even within a play calling structure the last 2 seasons that was not as helpful. I thought Dylan McCullough did a pretty good job of trying to find niche roles for each of his running backs and putting them in those situations. And if you can get an offensive coordinator that's a lot more creative using them, then I think you're going to be more effective. Because honestly, that's one of my beefs about last year's offensive staff. And I've defended Jared Parker in a lot of times, and I think he had potential as an OC. But one of my biggest frustrations was, why didn't they use Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price more to complement Audric Estime, especially in the pass game? And that was something that I found frustrating. I believe that's going to change under Mike Denbrock, but we have to see it, right? We have to see it. So when you break down this group and you say, okay, there's experience, there's some production coming back, there's some versatile skill sets coming back, there's impact talent coming back. Well, why isn't this group ranked among the best running back rooms in the country? I understand that. The reality is it's the production part. I think the production is better than what people think, but I don't think it's what is there in order to say, hey, they deserve to be in the same Well, I think they do, but I can understand and be sympathetic why, other outlets don't necessarily view this group as a top 5 running back room. When you look at a team like Ohio State and Penn State, for example, and you look at the running backs they have coming back, I'm sitting here advocating for the fact that last year Notre Dame had, 3 running backs that are coming back that combined for over 1,000 yards of total offense. And that sounds great. But Travion Henderson is a kid that last year had 926 rushing yards just by himself. He had 1,155 yards by himself. And as a freshman in 2021, had 1,255 rushing yards and over 1,500 yards. So there's a level of proven production there. And then, of course, this offseason, Ohio State adds Quinshawn Junkins, who rushed for over 1,100 yards and had 15 touchdowns last year and ran for over 1,500 yards and 16 touchdowns the year before. Now, if I'm sitting here today, would I trade the Notre Dame running back room for Ohio State? No, I wouldn't. But am I going to sit here and call an Ohio State fan a homer for saying he wouldn't trade for Notre Dame's room either? Of course not, because you're talking about over 3,000 career yards of rushing with one group. Actually, I think it's actually over 4,000 yards rushing with one group, and another group that has like 1,000 yards of total offense. So the proven production is not there. I understand it. It's the same thing when you look at the Penn State room and you talk about what their running back room has done. Nicholas Singleton had 752 yards last year, rushed for 1,000 yards the year before and 12 touchdowns. Katron Allen last year ran for 902 yards and 6 touchdowns. He ran for 867 the year before and 10 touchdowns. Far more proven production. But I'm going to make this case. While I am sympathetic to the argument about Notre Dame and these teams can't break down every team, and trust me, I get that. You can't break down every team and know the ins and outs of every team. I'm not going to criticize anyone for not having the Notre Dame running back room in the top 5. I'm not. But I'm going to say this, and I'm going to make this prediction. I have zero doubt that this is one of the 5 best running back rooms in college football. I have no doubt about that. You're going to get a Jadarian Price who's coming back. He's going to be a junior now. He's coming back now 2 years. He's now a second year removed from the Achilles injury. We saw the quickness and explosiveness last season. That's going to get ramped up an even greater level. And for those who saw him in the spring in practices, you could see it. You could see, I remember seeing him in the fall, and then I watched him in the spring and was saying, okay, he's got even more juice now that he's a year back. And then even more importantly, and this is what Coach McCullough was explaining in the spring, was they purposely tamped down his numbers, which we explained to you guys in the fall. So it's nice to hear a Notre Dame coach back us up on that. They tamped down the reps because they didn't want any setbacks with him. They didn't want to take a chance of any a further injury to that Achilles. They wanted to slowly work him back, have him as a kick returner, have him as a rotational running back. And we saw the potential. Average 5.9 yards per carry, would have ranked in the top, I think, 10, 15, top 10 nationally in kick return yards per kick if he would have qualified. For example, the Jaden Harrison, who's a dynamic 4.3 guy, a guy that we talk about is, an impact guy in Notre Dame, was a All-American kick returner last year at Marshall. He averaged 30.2 kick return yards per kick return. I believe it was 30.2, and had 2 touchdowns. Jadarian Price only had 10 returns last year, but he had 344 yards on those 10 returns and averaged 34.4 yards per return, which is over 4 yards more than what Jaden Harrison had last season as an All-American kick returner. So you saw the juice from him, and now he's even quicker and more explosive, and now has the reps underneath him to where, he missed a whole year of football. Now he kind of gets that rust shaken off. And here's the reality. Most Notre Dame fans don't talk about Jadarian Price. They don't. It's every time the running back conversation comes up, it's about Jeremiah Love, and understandably so. Jeremiah is a dynamic athlete, a special athlete. I mean, you guys saw the video clip, I would assume. Jeremiah's barely, maybe about 6'1". There's a clip of him when he went back home like last week of him jumping over two friends of his and dunking a basketball. Elite athlete. A guy that could play corner in college, a guy that could play receiver in college. He's an impact player. He's a guy that brings a ton of talent, a ton of athleticism to the table, and a guy that you look at and say, this guy could be an impact player. A dynamic impact player in a lot of different ways. And so he was a higher ranked recruit. And let's be honest, a lot of our conversation tends to, when we're talking about players we haven't seen a lot, the conversation is going to be centered around the guy that's ranked higher with a lot of people. So I'm sympathetic to that. And Jeremiah is a special player, but Jadarian Price is also a very, very good football player. And what excites me about 2024 is not Jadarian Price. It's not Jeremiah Love. It's that they have both of them. And to me, I'm not making a case for Notre Dame having a top 5 running back room if it's just one of them. I'm making the case for them having both of them. And that's when I look at it and say, boy, that's what I'm really excited about. And okay, and there's just a lot of talent there. And that's not it. If the running back room this season was just going to be Jabron Payne, Keidron Young, and Aeneas Williams, I'd say I think Notre Dame's going to be fine at running back. It's not a top 5 group. They're going to be fine at running back. That's a good group of players. But those guys are 3, 4, and 5 in whatever order you want to have them. And, with Jabron a little dinged up, with Keidron Young a little dinged up, Aeneas Williams comes out in the spring and has a great spring. And it just puts them in a position where when you look at the 2024 season, there's a lot of talent there. And the challenge for Mike Denbrock and Dylan McCullough is going to be, well, how do you use them? Right? I mean, how do you use these guys? How do you use them together? Is it just as a rotation like they have in the past, like they did with Logan Diggs or Audric Estime last year, like they did with Logan Diggs and Audric Estime and Chris Tyree the year before, or is it a situation where you say, okay, yes, you do that, but you have to find ways to use them together. And what I mean by together is not in a rotation where they're both like 1A, 1B, like we saw in 2022. Of course, you need to see that. There needs to be that, hey, every week we're going to have a game plan as a Notre Dame staff that we're going to get these two guys together, right? And so to me, I want to see that, but I want to see truly having them on the field together. Truly look at it and say, hey, listen, we've got to find ways that we've got Jadarian and Jeremiah on the field together. right? We're going to put them on the field and say, hey, look, this is what Jaydon does well. Jeremiah brings a very unicorn ability that we're going to utilize to how we build this team. And so you can have Jaydon on the field running the ball down the middle and running your RPO game where you're hitting little, quick throws to Jeremiah Love if the defense sucks in. Bubble screens, now screens, slants, crossers, out cuts, seam cuts, wide fade, the slot fade. There's a lot of different things you can do that puts defenses in a huge bind, especially early, if you're willing to do this. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do this. This is just me giving you my opinion. We haven't really seen a ton of it in practice. And really it hasn't really haven't seen it at all, really, if we're being honest. But it's something where you look at and say, boy, if the staff is willing to do this, you give defenses a very different look. And there's some very unique things that you can do. Jaydon Price catches the ball pretty well in the backfield as well. And I would say that's something unique about this entire room. They all can catch the ball very well. Now, Jaydon and Jabron are more, and Keydron Young are more traditional running backs when they talk about the pass game. Although I've been very, very surprised at how well Keydron Young catches the football. Aeneas and Jeremiah bring more of you can actually put them outside and have them run routes and have them do different things at that position as well. And the difference between Jeremiah and Aeneas, or Jeremiah and what Kyron Young was, or Kyron Williams was, is that in this instance, Jeremiah has more height, a lot more height and length. And the issue with Kyron, and it's an issue now also with Aeneas, is, there's things you can do with them as vertical pass players, but they're like 5'9", 5'10". So they're small targets, and they're not used to necessarily catching the ball down the field a lot. So you got to be careful about how you use them. Well, with Jeremiah, he's a 6'1" athlete with long arms. So there's some things you can do with him that you couldn't do. You're not going to run a slot fade to Kyron Williams very often because he's 5'9". You're not going to do that with Aeneas Williams. You can do that with Jeremiah Love because he's 6'1" and he's got receiver skills. So those are different things that you need to do. This duo just gives Notre Dame so much potential offensively to do a lot of different things. And that's something that has me very, very excited about what they can do as a backfield and what they can do as a group at just running back, but then also the all-around impact they can have. And if you're able to find ways to utilize Jeremiah and Jaydon in the pass game, and then eventually, Keydron and Aeneas, when their time comes, that impacts all the other positions as well. You have to defend the receiving core a lot different when you're doing that. You have to defend the tight end position a lot better, and especially throwing the ball over the middle. If you've got Jeremiah Love and Mitchell Evans or Eli Raridan or Cooper Flanagan on the field together, there's some concepts that you can run high-low that really can put teams in binds. But how do you defend these guys? And I won't be shocked if at some point in time this season we see Mitchell Evans, and all of a sudden, boom, behind comes an in cut from the other guy. And I could certainly see something like that, and that would have me pretty fired up to be able to watch that this season and see those guys have that kind of impact on this football team. So those are all things that have me excited about what this room could do. And then when you look at the future of the running back room, and we're going to kind of just browse through this quickly because when the interesting is the future of the running back room is like we talked about with other positions like linebacker is kind of now. I mean, Jeremiah Love has 2 full seasons to play before he's even eligible to go to the NFL draft. Jaydon Price is eligible going after this season, but you're probably going to get 2 more years out of him. You're going to get minimum 3 years out of Keydron Young. You're going to get minimum 3 years out of Aeneas Williams. You're probably going to get 2 to 3 more years out of Jabron Payne. And then so this group this group will hopefully be together for another year, at least the primary parts of that. And if you don't have them together for another year, your hope is that Jaydon Price goes out there and has a 1,000-yard season and has a big impact season, and he decides to go to the NFL draft. Okay, cool. That's great. That's great for Jaydon, and that means that Notre Dame's going to be really, really good this year if he has that kind of season. But the Notre Dame staff has got to show that they can continue recruiting this level. And when you look at the 2025 class, they took an interesting approach. And it's one that I think could warrant criticism, or one that you could look at and say, that's smart planning. I look at it as smart planning because in this era of In this era of the transfer portal and NIL and all these different aspects of it, it can be challenging really putting a roster together because you can keep loading up on big time running backs after big time running back, and guys can help you right away as freshmen every year. But eventually, you're going to start having some of these guys leave. And then you get into situations where your depth chart has this really weird old to young balance, or some years where you've now got to count on a freshman to play because of the way that it all broke down. And so, what Notre Dame decided to do in the 2025 class, it's not a great running back class. There's some good players at the top, but it had been struggles to get some of those guys. So what they did was say, look, let's get good football players, but get guys that are maybe a little bit different, guys that may need more time. So let's say there's a kid out there that's a real dynamic athlete, but he's not a great running back yet, but he's talented, and in time he could become an impact running back. Well, that sounds a lot like Justin Thurman, who is not the proven player that I don't think he's had 1,000 yards yet in high school in a season. I think he rushed for 700 or 800 yards last season. But he's a guy that's a legit 4-4 guy. He's a guy that's a very dynamic athlete. He's a guy that brings a lot of impact potential to the roster. But he's a raw kid. He's still learning the position. He catch the ball. He can run. He can maybe even play some defense. He can do a lot of different things. And then you look at a guy like Daniel Anderson, and you say, okay, this is an interesting kid, because you talk about a guy that is not a great athlete. He's a solid athlete, probably like a 4.7 type athlete. You think Tony Jones type. And that's actually my comp for him, as like a Tony Jones. He's got great vision, really good feet, really good balance, good production, comes from a very good high school in Arkansas. But he's also a great like team guy. He's the kind of player that's going to come to Notre Dame and know, hey, listen, I'm going to battle my butt off. And if I can play as a freshman, great. But if I can't, okay, what's my role? I'm going to go down there and give you a great look on scout team, and then come out the next year as a sophomore and try to do the same thing, to where someday you may look back and be like, he was just a great teammate, but he never did anything. But then don't be shocked if as a junior or a senior, Daniel's a guy that kind of breaks out and he's your number 2 back, or maybe even a starter if a guy goes pro early, or if there's some injuries, and he has a good season. He's a good football player. He's just not that same high-level prospect. And so then the question is, and I actually saw somebody say this, is, well, why take 2? It's a very good question. But here's why you take 2. Because you're in a situation where you have to be smart about the realities of college football. You have to think about the fact that while you may be able to keep this group of 5 happy for a season, it's going to be challenging to keep them all happy for 2. And so you look at the 2025 season when these kids show up. Jadarian's going to be a senior. Jabron's going to be a senior. Jeremiah is going to be a sophomore. And then, of course, Kedron and Aeneas will be sophomore, or excuse me, Jeremiah will be a junior. And the other 2 kids, Kedron and Aeneas, will be sophomore. So you bring these 2 kids and you say, well, that's 7 running backs. That's a lot. It is a lot. But then you go to 2026 when that group of guys are sophomores, and Jadarian's probably gone, Jabron's gone, and there's a chance Jeremiah might be gone to the NFL. And now it's Kedron as a junior, it's Aeneas as a junior, and these 2 kids are sophomores. That's where you're at. And then, of course, you'd want to go out and do whatever you do with your freshman class. So I understand it. And it makes sense roster-wise, but if you get into a situation where you can also guarantee that only one guy leaves if the floodgates open that way. And that can happen sometimes. I mean, you could have a situation where, Jadarian comes out and he's a stud and he goes pro, and Jeremiah's a stud and he's going to be your main number 1 in 2025. And somebody else, is a couple other guys like, yeah, I just don't want to play here because, I want to go somewhere else and be an impact player right away. I don't know that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't know of any of those kids that are that way, but you have to plan for that being a possibility. And I think this shows some advanced thought by the Notre Dame staff, but you also can't just land dudes every year at Notre Dame, because those kids aren't going to be happy sitting the bench, for multiple seasons. And so you add some positional flexibility, which they have with Justin Thurman. And then you add a guy that's going to buy into what you're trying to do in Daniel Anderson. But they still went out and tried to get an impact back. They tried to recruit Usman Kroma. He wasn't interested. They tried to recruit Waltez Clark. He wasn't interested. They recruited James Simon. Did a great job in the James Simon recruitment. And he was very interested in Notre Dame, but just at the end of the day, they weren't going to be able to get him to the point where he was going to be on the same. They were going to be on the same level with some other players, and so actually James about an hour ago committed to Texas, and so that's kind of where we anticipated him going. But Notre Dame made it interesting. So it's not like they purposely said, "Hey, we're not going to recruit any top backs." If there's one that is interested, there just weren't a lot of top backs. There weren't a lot of the top backs interested in Notre Dame. And this is also partly the reason because of how well they have recruited. But, they had to pick the right fits, and they thought James Simon had sort of the personality to fit at Notre Dame. But he ended up going to Texas, and that's a really, really good pickup, for Texas. So that's where Notre Dame is at for the future. So you could talk about 2025, having a 7-man running back room. I just think that's unlikely. I think somebody's going to either leave or move positions. We saw Tevin Ford move positions this year. We've seen it in the past. But I think it was actually good planning. The key, however, to making this work, and this is where I'm at, is the only way this works is if you kind of have that year where you rebuild the depth with good quality players. They're kind of doing that a little bit at receiver in this class as well. But then you got to follow it up the next year with, okay, let's get back to impact players. Let's get back to top-level players in the 2026 class, and we'll see if they're able to do that. There's some good players they're after early, but it's very early. Let's see if they're able to do that. So I think the future of the running back room is very bright. There's a lot of talent. There's a lot of different type of talent. There's some players that can do different things. There's guys that are bell cow backs. I think Jadarian Price can be that, but definitely Keydron Young be that. Anees Williams has a little bit of that in him. Jabron Payne can be that type of player. There's home run hitters. I mean, Gerard and Jeremiah are both home run hitters. Keydron Young's a home run hitter, and to a degree, Aeneas Williams is as well. There's some guys that can handle the traditional pass game, running back pass game roles, pass blockers, and then swings and arrows and slides and screens and things along those lines, which is Jabron Payne and Jadarian Price and Keydron Young. And then there's guys that have a more expanded pass game repertoire, Jeremiah Love and Aeneas Williams. So I just love the complementary nature of this group. I think that continues down the road with the players that they're landing, and I think they'll continue to make that a point of emphasis as they move forward. And look, anytime you have those unique players that present matchup problems, whether it's a hybrid tight end, whether it's a running back like a Jeremiah Love, whether it's a receiver that can do some different things, that always gives you an advantage on offense because it makes it harder for defenses to prepare and defend it. If you've got this guy that's just it's like Deebo Samuel in the NFL. You just, where's he going to get the ball? Is he going to get it running down the field? Is he going to get it up the seam? Is he going to get it on some quick stuff to get the ball in space? Is they going to get him on jets? Are they going to line him up in the backfield and literally hand the ball off to him? And so there's so many different things that you can do. And I believe Notre Dame has the ability to do a lot of those type of things. And this running back room is going to end up, I believe, by the end of the season, the conversation is going to be about how it is one of the best running back rooms. And then when we're going into the next season, then it'll be people have very clear, like the secondary, right? I mean, it's a lot like the secondary. We told everyone, and you all mostly agreed with us, that this defensive back room in 24 for Notre Dame is going to be special. It's one of the best defensive back rooms in college football. Nobody else is really talking about that. Not many people were talking about that nationally. Well, then by the end of the year, everybody kind of agrees this was a great, defensive back room. And now you look at, Pro Football Focus puts out there, who's the best clickbait type tweets, but it's fine. It's fun engagement for the offseason. I don't have a problem with it. But it's like, okay, you've got Michigan and Ohio State, but then there's Notre Dame right there in the middle. So now Notre Dame is getting that conversation as a top secondary, and people see what Mike Mickens is building and what Marcus Freeman and what Al Golden are building and Chad Bowden are building in the secondary. I believe next year is when it just becomes like, okay, yep, we get it. This is Notre Dame's doing something different at running back. And people are going to then buy more into that this is a legit top 5 room. I believe it is, but they now got to go prove it nationally, and they're certainly going to get their chances in 2024. So that's going to do it for the running back breakdown. We're going to do buy, sell, hold next. So I'm very much looking forward to this. But before we go to the next section, do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. If you're listening via one of our podcast partners like Spotify, we would greatly, greatly appreciate that 5-star review, and helps us spread the word on how it is. And then also you guys help us spread the word. look, there's nothing better from an advertising standpoint than word of mouth. And we have done everything we've done at Irish Breakdown has been because we bank on our product being good enough that if we can get people to watch, that they're going to want to stay. And we've seen that with how we've grown over the years. And part of that also is you all have to help us out by letting your Notre Dame friends and family know about what we're doing and having them help out with, check our shows out as well, whether you want to watch live on YouTube or you want to watch it later on one of our podcast platforms. We would greatly appreciate that. You can sign up at Apple's, Spotify, a lot of other different aspects. You can listen to that as well. So definitely check that out. And of course, you can support us by going to the boards at irishbreakdown.com and becoming a premium member, whether it's a Gold Club member, Shamrock, Booster Club member of the Blue area. You get some free merch with that. Or if you want to do an annual or monthly subscription, you can sign up for there as well. Part 3 of today's show, and I've been looking forward to this. And if it wasn't for having my guy John Garcia on and talking about running backs, I might have just skipped right to the buy sell hold. A lot of really good submissions today. Wasn't able to get all of them just because we're not going to have enough time, but I did get a lot of them, and you guys did a great job this week with your buy sell hold submissions. And so we're going to get into those next and have a little bit of fun here on the Irish Breakdown podcast doing our buy sell hold. So let's bring up number 1. Garen Knutson says having a Heisman winner or finalist at the wide receiver position would be more beneficial to Notre Dame than having a quarterback win the honor. Garen, this is a very good one because I have been back and forth on the answer to this because I understand the premise of what you're saying. If you want to talk about what's beneficial to Notre Dame, it's about being able to impact the receiver position and recruit that position better. And I would argue that, okay, having a Heisman winner or finalist at the receiver position would be more beneficial to the wide receiver recruiting efforts than having a quarterback win the honor. But I'm going to sell this because I still feel like when you've got a quarterback that is perceived by an elite player as an elite player, that completely changes the narrative about your program. I still say, and this could be my quarterback bias, I'll own that. It could absolutely be my quarterback bias, but I still believe there's nothing that sells people on the quality of a program more than having big-time quarterbacks and having a string of big-time quarterbacks. Because if you have you look at LSU. I mean, do you think Bryce Underwood goes to LSU if they don't have Jaden Daniels win the Heisman last year? He was their second Heisman in 4 years, right? And now all of a sudden LSU's recruiting receivers every year and recruiting quarterbacks all the time. And why is that? Because they've been able to produce a Heisman Trophy winner quarterback. Now that's look, quarterbacks are ringleaders, and I could recruit great receivers every year, but that doesn't mean I'm going to recruit great running backs or great quarterbacks or linemen. You recruit a great quarterback, and that's going to have an impact on your entire roster. I mean, look, read the article that we had when Dallas Gold committed. He talked about Duce Knight. This is a cornerback that's talking about how much the quarterback impacted him. Do you think if Notre Dame had a 5-star receiver that he's going to be able to talk to a nose tackle about coming to Notre Dame? Probably not. I mean, he can have an impact on it, but it's not going to have the impact that you're going to have when you have a big-time quarterback. And so I still think that having a quarterback that can impact the game to this degree is still better for the program overall. Next question. We got 3 from Salty Virginia Peanuts. Buy, sell, or hold. The players who attended this event, this is all in reference to the workout that we discussed with the 3 quarterbacks and all the receivers. And so Salty has 3 buy, sell, or holds in reference to it. First one, buy, sell, hold. The players who attended this event are those who care the most about Notre Dame's success. I'm selling that. These type of events are not always going to be. Everyone is there. There's all types of reasons why guys are there. Sometimes, hey, look, I'm with my quarterback coach, really putting in the work about what I'm trying to do. So let's just say hypothetically that Steve Angeli has a quarterback coach back home. And he's got this is a week where they've scheduled to where they're just going to do this really intensive workout. Sure, it'd be nice if Steve was down there getting those throws in and with those guys, but Steve's gotten a ton of work in with his teammates, and he's putting this work in this week, work weekend of work with a specific quarterback coach because he sees something that he has to work on, and his quarterback's coach is going to help him with that. I don't know if Steve did that. I'm just saying hypothetically. So I'm just going to look at that and say I'm not buying into that. I think we can read into certain things and try to create problems. But I think, and sometimes that could be true, but I just think it's unfair to just assume that because certain guys weren't there, that they don't care as much. Duce Knight's attendance, buy, sell, or hold, is a strong signal that he is a not only committed, but he is a de facto team member. I'm selling that because he's not a team member until he is signed with Notre Dame. And look, here's the reality. There was a time when you might have seen a Peyton Bowen or a Keon Keeley at a workout like this. Right. And Keon Duce is not those guys. But the point being, no matter how committed a guy may be, you're never truly a part of the team until you sign on the dotted line. Now, Duce is, again, and I regret even to a degree comparing him to those guys. I wasn't comparing Duce to those guys. I was using those guys as an example to say for any recruit, you're not truly part of the team until you sign, in my opinion. Because at any point in time, you can change your mind. But I don't think Duce is going to do that. I think Duce is not only committed to Notre Dame, he's heavily committed to Notre Dame. He's recruiting for Notre Dame. He's doing everything right. This bullcrap crystal ball thing that was nothing but clickbait, which just is the worst of this industry, which I think absolutely sucks in by large part nowadays because people don't care about proper journalism anymore. They not all. But there's a lot of people that don't care about that anymore. It's all based on clicks, because making money is more important than anything else. We don't do it that way. I know other people that cover Notre Dame, some friends of mine that are in this business that also view it, that don't view it that way. There's some of us still around. I hope that I'm that way, or that you all believe that we're that way at IB, that, yeah, right, we need to make money. We got to do things to make money, but not at the expense of integrity and honesty and doing things the right way. And you're going to get people who are going to use Duce to make money for themselves in improper ways. That's what's happened to him. And that's caused some Notre Dame fans to have feelings about Duce that I think are unfair and not based on reality, but based on what people write. And the fact of the matter is, if you say, well, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Well, from the minute he's committed to Notre Dame, Duce has done everything that you expect an elite quarterback, to a leader of the class, to do. He's not taking other visits. He's recruiting the heck out of other players. He's been a ringleader of the class. He's been a leader of the class, and he's working his butt off to better his own game. That's exactly what you want him to be. And I do think that this event, I'm buying that this is a strong signal that he's committed. 100% buying. The second part is why I'm selling this, because I don't think that makes him a de facto team member, because I don't think there's any such thing. You're either on a team or you're not. So, third one, the players in attendance will be the most successful at their positions over the next 4 years. I'm definitely selling that, because most of those players won't even be on the team in 2025, much less looking forward to years 2, 3, and 4. Riley Leonard's gone. So of the 9 players that were there, CJ Carr, Duce Knight, and Jaden Greathouse are the only guys that have eligibility on beyond 2024. So 6 of the 9, because Greathouse is going to be back, but Jaden Harrison is gone after this year. Chris Mitchell's gone after this year. Bo Collins is gone after this year. Potentially, Jaden Thomas and Deion Colsey will be gone after this year. And so was that it? I thought there was a 6th receiver. But those guys are all going to be gone after this season. So no, I mean, you're a lot of your receivers are going to be Cam Williams and Micah Gilbert and Elijah Burris and guys like that are going to be put. I mean, if talking about over the course of 4 years, are going to be there. And I think Brandon's right. There's people putting weight. This was a cool photo. It's a cool reality. I think it's great that these players are putting in this work, and it signals the things we've talked about you signaling. But I think in a lot of ways, we're reading way too much into what it means outside of, but them Notre Dame players are putting in work. Those players are putting in work. It doesn't mean everybody else isn't. Doesn't mean that at all. And I think it's unfair to think that it does, to be honest with you. Garen, we went the wrong way on that one. Okay, yeah, there we go. Mark Smooks, buy, sell, or hold. The offensive results in 2024 should help fans get over the Ludwig affair. I buy that. If Notre Dame has the kind of season I think they're going to have, then I don't think people are going to talk about. I mean, we're already seeing that to a degree. There's still a lot of people that will say right now that the Ludwig thing. I'm glad it happened because it means we got Mike Denbrock. I mean, I think that's already started to have an effect with some. And to your point, Mark, if they have the results that we think that they should have, right? I love how you had should capitalize. I didn't do that. Mark did that. If they have the results they should have, then I don't think anyone's going to be like, man, they should still wish they had Andy Ludwig. And that's coming from someone like me who's a big Andy Ludwig fan. But Mike Denbrock's also an excellent coach. So I'm buying that. This is another buy, sell, or hold from Mark Smooks. From the 2023 recruiting class, which recruit would you have most bought to Notre Dame that signed elsewhere? I've said this one before. It's Keon Keeley. I for a long time he was so all Notre Dame. I mean, he was so bought into Notre Dame and was recruiting other kids to Notre Dame and just was about as about of a Notre Dame kid as you could find. And then it went away, and it was a major bummer. But it just went away, and that was unfortunate, and it was disappointing and all that. But he's a guy that I would have absolutely bought into coming to Notre Dame that ended up not signing. Buy, sell, or hold from the 2023 recruiting class. Which recruit would you have most sold to Notre Dame, but did sign with Notre Dame? That's a good one. I'm going through the list, and the only guy that I can kind of really think of is Kenny Minchie, because he was committed somewhere else, and Notre Dame. So Notre Dame early on tried to flip Kenny from Pitt, and he said no. And then eventually they were able to get him there. So I'd probably have to go with Kenny Minchie. Now, I'll say this: until Notre Dame started recruiting KK Smith, I would not have assumed there. But once they got involved, you knew they were going to win that one. So I'm going to go Kenny Minchie on that one. So I'm gonna. It's a good one. Not really buy, sell, or hold, but I like the spirit of what you're trying to ask. Domer Grizz, buy, sell, or hold. The gap between Xavier Watts and his backup is wider than at any other position on defense. I'll buy that. And that's not so much a knock on the safety position. I mean, they're a little bit, but that says how good is Xavier Watts, unanimous All-American. But then also there's such good depth everywhere. I mean, your backup to Drake Bone is what? Kingston Villamasa. Your backup to Jack Kaiser is like what? Jalen Sneed. Your backup to Jordan Patelho is Junior Tuamaka and maybe Boubacar. Your backup to RJ Oben is Josh Burnham or vice versa. And then behind them all is Bryce Young. Your backups to your tackles are Jason Onye and Gabriel Rubio and Donovan Heinisch. So you're pretty loaded to those spots. So I would absolutely buy that one. And then the second one is the buy, sell, or hold. The gap between Charles Jagasaw and the backup left tackle will be wider than between Riley Leonard and whoever wins the backup job this year, quarterback. So the gap between Jagasaw is going to be greater than I'll buy that. I'll buy that as well, because I think that Riley Leonard is going to be the starting quarterback this year, and whoever wins the backup job I'll say this: I'm going to buy it if the guy that wins the backup job is one of the two guys I think will win it. If it's Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr, then I'm buying this. If it's Steve Angeli, then I think there is a bigger talent gap between Riley Leonard and Steve Angeli than between Charles Jagasaw and Selman Absher. So I'm going to buy it if it's Kenny Minchie or CJ Carr. If it's not, then I'm selling. My Andrew Gilmore had a few of them, but this one was a smaller, so I fit it in with another. He says, Andrew, my man, you're always trying to start some stuff. I love it. Andrew says, buy, sell, or hold. Mike Elko is a better coach than Marcus Freeman. I'm going to sell that. I think Mike Elko is a more experienced coach, but I don't think he's a better coach. I'm a big Mike Elko fan. You all know that. I've praised him before, but I just think Marcus Freeman's a more dynamic coach. I just do. I think he's a even better recruiter than Elko was. He was, a very effective defensive coordinator. you can't really compare his tenure to Elko's because Elko was recovering from the Van Gorder tenure where, Freeman was building on what was established with Elko and then Clark Lee and then himself. But I just, especially when you look at the change in production, I mean, just the difference in experience as well factors in. But, look, Marcus Freeman beat Mike Elko last year. Marcus Freeman's teams have a better record than Mike Elko's the last 2 years. So I'm selling that. I'm selling that. I think Marcus Freeman's a better football coach. Buy, sell, or hold from Jaylin G. Mike Brown is viewed by highly ranked high school receivers as a top 10 developer of talent. I'm selling that. I've not gotten that impression from recruits. Then his second one, and I like that you did this one. The second one is Mike Brown is a top developer of wide receiver talent. So I really like how you did this. Like, one is perception versus reality. And we haven't gotten one like this before. And so I really like this two-part nature, Jaylin G. So I'm going to sell the first one, that Mike Brown is perceived that way. I'm going to buy the second one, that he is one. When you look at the production that he had at Cincinnati, with the talent he had, when you look at what he got out of the receivers at Wisconsin last year, when I watch him coach, I think he's absolutely in that conversation of top 10 developers of wide receiver talent. Yeah. I'm sorry, Jaylin G is a female. My apologies, but great question. Very great submissions there, Jaylin G. I appreciate that very much. And thinking outside the box about presenting two ways of looking at it. Very, very well done. Anthony A. Gilmore with another one. Buy, sell, or hold. Lance Leopold will lead Kansas to a Big 12 championship appearance and be the hottest name on the coaching carousel at the end of the year. I'm selling this for multiple reasons. Number one, I am selling this because I look at it and say I do not think Kansas is going to be in the Big 12 championship game. I like what they're doing. I talked about their backfield yesterday. I just think there's going to be at least two teams better. I don't see a situation where they're going to be better. Between Utah, Oklahoma State, and Kansas State, I just think two of those three are going to be better. And their success is dependent upon Jalen Daniels being healthy for a whole year, and he hasn't shown that yet. He just hasn't. And I'm a huge Lance Leopold fan. The second reason that I don't believe that I'm selling on that is because even if the first part is accurate, I don't think the second part's going to be accurate, because I don't think Lance Leopold is going to be a guy that is going to get the same type of love that a guy like Kalen DeBoer got, being from a smaller school. And the big reason why is Kalen DeBoer's 49 and Lance Leopold's 60. And a year from now, he just turned 60, but a year from now, I mean, he's going to be going into the 2025 season as a 61-year-old. You just don't see those type of guys become the hot name. I mean, Kurt Sign, I'm not saying he won't get a better job, but he won't be the hot name. The hot name will almost always be some younger guy or some guy like a Kalen DeBoer. Like, Kalen DeBoer did not get the Bama job because he led Washington to the Pac-12 title game. He got it because of a track record of success, but also looking at it from the standpoint of he led them to the national title game. So, no, I'm going to sell on both of those. But I appreciate the respect for Lance Leopold that your submission even presents. I can definitely respect that, even though I'm selling it. A. Gilmore also said, buy, sell, or hold. Luke Fickell made a huge mistake jumping to Wisconsin, especially now that the division format is gone. He should have either stayed at Cincinnati or gone to USC, Auburn, or Florida, as he was rumored as each school's top original target. Well, number one, I don't know that that's necessarily accurate in regard to him being the top candidate, because there were some people that said that he was the top candidate for – hold on one second. Sorry, my wife is getting ready to leave to go somewhere, so she wanted to say goodbye. Of course, as I told her, she's more important, so I had to say goodbye to her. So thank you for that for bearing with me during that interruption. But going back to this question, there was a lot of people that reported that Luke Fickell was the number one target for Notre Dame. That was false. So I don't know that this necessarily is that one. But of the options he gave, I think Wisconsin is a so I'm gonna sell this that he made a mistake because I actually think Wisconsin is a place that he fits in relatively well. It's not a big time program. The expectations aren't nuts. He can recruit the type of kid he likes, which is more of the hardworking, under the radar type of kid there. Wisconsin's still going to be a better program than Cincinnati, and I don't think he would have fit well at USC, Auburn, or Florida. I don't see Luke Fickell, an Ohio guy who's coached at Ohio State his entire career, who's a Big Ten guy through and through. I don't see how he fits at USC, Auburn, or Florida. And now, okay, yes, USC's in the Big Ten now, but it's still LA. And I think Luke Fickell is a Wisconsin, Cincinnati type of coach. So, you know, I'm selling that. I maybe I could argue he should have stayed at Cincinnati, but I still think Wisconsin has a higher ceiling as a program than Cincinnati. Cincinnati had success as a group of 5 team in the AAC. They were always going to have the most talented roster. He's never going to have the most talented roster in the Big 12, in my opinion. And he's never going to have the most talented roster in the Big 10. So he's at a place that I think he fits very well. So I'm going to sell that one. It's a good submission, though. D. McCack, 2, on buy, sell, or hold on the take that this is the deepest Notre Dame team in a decade. So what he was referring to is there was something from Lindy's Sports, and I'm going to have to go buy Lindy's today. I'm super fired up that's out now. I'm going to have to call my wife before she leaves her appointment today and tell her to swing by the mall and pick me up a copy of it. So I'm very excited about that. But apparently he said that in that there's a lot more to this question, but I couldn't fit it all on one card. Apparently they talked in the magazine about how this is the deepest Notre Dame team in a long time. So the buy, sell, or hold is on the take that this is the deepest Notre Dame team in decades. Look, I'm going to buy it on paper of what I perceive the talent to be. I'm buying it. I mean, Notre Dame has positions where if you started their backups, it would be better than certain teams that they've had in recent years. Just is. But the flip side is, if we're being honest, is a lot of the backups are guys that you have to say, okay, they're talented, but they're deep. So I would say, yes, I'm buying it on paper, but I'm going to be with Nate and Indy Milton fan. I'm put a hold on it as my answer. And I don't do this often, but I'm going to put a hold on it because we need to see that the talent can turn into production. On paper, theoretically, I want to buy it. I do want to buy it. I just need to see it first. So I'm going to do a hold on that one. And then Heaper 27, the football team will have 3 consensus All-Americans on the team this year. I buy that. I think you're going to have 2 in the secondary alone. You're going to have, at the very least, I fully expect Xavier Watts and Benjamin Morrison to be at least consensus All-Americans, because to be consensus, you only have to be an All-American of 3 of the 5 big ones. And then I think I'll just name all the guys that could be potentially more. I mean, Riley Leonard could potentially be that. You could have one of the receivers could break out maybe that way. Mitchell Evans definitely could be in that conversation. Billy Schrouth could potentially jump into that conversation. Maybe a Nashton Craig or a Charles Jagasol. Billy Schrouth is the guy that I would most look there. Howard Cross comes in the season with tons of preseason expectations, which means he's going to get a boost in certain things. Maybe Riley Mills can become that guy. Maybe a Jack Kaiser has a really big breakout year. Maybe Drake Bowen has a big breakout year. Between all of those players I just mentioned, you just need one of them to step up and be that, assuming that, actually, let's just say 2 of the 3 of Jabron, I was looking at Jabron Payne's card I had open. 2 of the 3 of Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watson, Howard Cross, who were All-Americans last year to some degree, or actually Benjamin was a freshman All-American, and Howard and Xavier were All-Americans, and then they're all 3 preseason All-Americans. If only 2 of those 3 guys are consensus, you only need one of all those other players to have that. So I'm definitely going to buy that. And if Notre Dame is the team we think they're going to be, then at least one would be there. So yeah, they look, last year they were a 10-3 team that had 2 unanimous All-Americans. So yeah, I think they'll get 3 consensus All-Americans. I think the The 2020 team had like 3 or 4. I believe Kyle Hamilton was one, Liam Eichenberg was one, Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa, I believe, was also one. So you've had years where you've had that before. I think they'll do that again. Christopher Crosby, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will have an easier time with Texas A&M in week 1 than Texas will have with them the last week of the season. I love this one, Christopher. That's a great submission. I'm buying that because I believe that this, and I said this about Ohio State 2 years ago, that if you're going to catch Ohio State, you want to catch them early because they're going to be a much tougher team late, in my opinion, talking about it from Notre Dame standpoint. I see the same thing here. I do. As long as they can stay healthy, I think come October, November, A&M is going to be an even better team. Second part of the buy, sell, or hold, you were happy that Texas – buy, sell, or hold, you were happy that Texas versus Texas A&M rivalry is back. I'm very happy about that. I mean, I remember growing up most of my life. I mean, I don't know if it was always this way, but I felt like a lot of these games would be played like on the Friday after Thanksgiving. They'd have this game. I remember – I think – didn't Ricky Waters break the all-time rushing record against A&M the Saturday after Thanksgiving? I believe that was the case. So I'm buying that. I think that this rivalry never should have gone away. And we talk a lot about how, tradition is being destroyed by these conference moves. And in a lot of ways it is. But there are some instances, and this being one, where there is some tradition being brought back. And so on the whole, way more tradition is being lost. But I'm going to celebrate the instances where it's coming back. And this is one of those. And they should play every single year. Every year they should do this. God Country Notre Dame Barbecue. Buy, sell, or hold. If healthy, Coach Freeman will publicly name Riley Leonard the starting quarterback by the middle of the 3rd week, or at least 10 practices of fall camp. I mean, I'm buying that. Yeah, I mean, look, we all know he's going to be the starting quarterback, so I'm buying that. Buy, sell, or hold. The Notre Dame players and coaches believe they can be legit contenders for the national championship in 2024. I can't say that all of them feel that way. I mean, there's probably some that don't feel that way, but I will buy that at least a chunk of the coaching staff and players believe that. Yes, absolutely. I'm buying that. Buy, sell, or hold from Greg Nielsen. Notre Dame has most of their 2025 class secured at this point. The pros of having your class locked in this early outweigh the cons of potentially filling up at positions and missing out on a late bloomer or under-the-radar prospect who blossoms the senior season. I agree with that. I'm going to buy that. Yes. There are always concerns about you're going to miss out on guys. But in this era of this coaching staff, they've shown a willingness to keep recruiting. And if they've, quote-unquote, met their numbers, they will keep recruiting if the right player comes along. And so in the way that Notre Dame does it, I'm going to buy that. I think their dangers also, one of the cons is, do guys reach their peaks? Do other guys, pass them up? Those are all fair. But in this instance, I think that especially for Notre Dame, I think there's other schools where I would argue that's probably not the best thing for them is to do that. I think you can make a case that with certain players that or in certain programs that they need to let it play out and finish stronger later because the way that they recruit. But in Notre Dame's case, I think it's necessary for them to be that way. Good submission, Gregory. Went the wrong way. Zibby's boxing gloves. John, he's got 3 submissions here. First one, Jonathan Smith has Michigan State competing in the Big Ten within 4 years. Well, if you define competing as they're an 8+ win team on the regular, a team that can, and then when they've got that veteran team can win 10+ games, yeah, I'm going with that. I'm buying that. I think they can be that. If competing means competing for the championship, I don't buy that. I don't think Michigan State in the current makeup of the Big Ten can win the Big Ten. But if by competing you mean they're competing to be one of the top 3 or 4, yeah, I do. I think he's a heck of a football coach. I do. I'm a big Jonathan Smith fan. Buy, sell, or hold. The Georgia Tech game is a closer call than the Louisville game for Notre Dame. I'm going to buy that. And the reason I'm going to buy that is I think that Georgia Tech has a very dynamic quarterback that could give Notre Dame some problems like a lot of other people. And the other reason I'm buying that is because I have no reason to back this up. It's not based on matchup. I think this Louisville team has a heck of a football team coming back, but I'm buying this because I just have a feeling that this is going to be a game that Notre Dame just comes out and smashes Louisville this year. And if you look at the 2 teams that Notre Dame lost to in 2022, but then played again in 2023, they destroyed both of them. I mean, they lost to USC by 11 and then came out and beat them by 28 this year. They lost to Stanford in 2022 and beat them by, was it 33 this year? They're going to be pissed off at that game. I think they're going to be very pissed off. And if they're not pissed off in that game, then that's going to bother me about this football team. Buy, sell, or hold. Deion has less than 2 years left at Colorado. Bonus on whether you think he gets fired or takes another job. Oh, I'm going to buy that. Less than 2 years, meaning, well, yeah, I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that because I think he leaves when his kids leave. That's what I think. So, yeah, no need to get into that too much and overthink it. I think he'll leave when his kids leave. Onward to victory. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame's defense will accomplish what the 2018 defense did by not allowing any of their regular season opponents to score more than 3 touchdowns in a game. And I believe he followed up with something along the lines of the Wake Forest game. So the Wake Forest did score 3 or more touchdowns. Oh, no. Okay. So what he's saying because he had more in he's saying Wake Forest scored 3 and that was the most. And so what he's saying is no one will score more than 3 touchdowns a game. Okay. So I misread that initially and now I'm remembering it. I'm going to buy that. I'm trying to think of, the toughest game. I mean, A&M, Louisville, Florida State, USC. Yeah, I'm going to buy that. I think, teams will score more than 21 points, but will they score more than 4 touchdowns on the defense? No, I don't. I'm going to buy that. I like that one, Onward to victory. I'm going to buy that. I think it's going to be a really, really good defense. And if they give up more, it'll be because they give up a garbage touchdown late in a 56-28 game, something like that. Jim Halloran, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame wins another national championship in lacrosse before football wins another national championship. I'm going to sell that. Lacrosse team is going to be very, very good. But, man, they are losing a ton from their team. Now, I have no idea what everybody else brings back. I don't follow lacrosse, but it is hard to win 3 championships in a row when you're going to lose as much as Notre Dame is losing from their team. Now, could they get back to it in a couple of years? Sure, of course. But as I've said for a while now, I think Notre Dame wins a title within the next 3 years. I do. And I'm not going back on that. I'm very excited about this football team. D Troll Hunter has a lot of them here, so we're going to rock through these. D Troll Hunters, buy, sell, or hold. Rowing the boat in Minnesota this year comes to a halt after the season with Joe Rossi's departure to Michigan State this offseason. I'm liking that. I'm with you on that. I think Joe Rossi had a very, very big part in why PJ Fleck had success at Minnesota. I'm not a big fan of some things he's done as a football coach. I think he's a very overrated coach. He's done some solid things. He's a solid football coach. The 2 of the last 4 years have been subpar. You're coming off a 6-7 season, and I think Minnesota's going to struggle this year. I do. I mean, I don't love their football team. I don't love the talent that they have. Their schedule's not exactly a cakewalk schedule, but it's not brutal. You play North Carolina in the opener. You play Rhode Island, Nevada, Iowa, at Michigan, home against USC, at UCLA, Maryland, at home, at Illinois, at Rutgers, home against Penn State, at Wisconsin. I mean, Michigan's going to be a loss. UCLA is going to be a loss. Wisconsin's going to be a loss. I think they lose at home to Penn State. I think they lose at home to USC. I think they lose at home to Iowa. And then between at Illinois, at Rutgers, and home against Maryland, I think there's a lot of losses in there, in my opinion. A lot of losses. And I think that'll be time for Minnesota to move on. Or even if PJ, does well and leaves, that doesn't answer your question because you're talking about it coming to a halt because of Rossi's departure. And that's the part I agree with. So I do think that they're going to struggle this year. Buy, sell, or hold. Michigan State being a top 10 coaching staff. I like Jonathan Smith a lot. I don't think it's a top 10 coaching staff. It's a very good coaching staff, but I don't think it's a top 10 coaching staff. So I'm going to sell that. I do like Joe Rossi a lot because speaking of Joe Rossi, he's there. Their offensive coordinator's solid. The rest of their staff is good. He brought, the Lindgren's a guy that's been, his first year at Michigan State, but he came with them from Oregon State. So I think Oregon State had a very good football staff. Top 10, I don't have them top 10, but they're definitely top 25. Definitely top 25. Let's see here. We got some more from Detroit Hunter. Illinois versus Northwestern during rivalry week being a game between two bowl-bound teams. I'm going to actually buy that. I'm not quite buying it with great confidence because I want to see if Northwestern can be good again this year when they're not able to sneak up on a bunch of people. I think that's going to be an interesting aspect to this. But, yeah, I'm going to buy it. I actually like Illinois. I look at Northwestern. They get Miami of Ohio at home. They get Duke at home, Eastern Illinois at home, Indiana at home, Wisconsin at home, Ohio State at home, and Illinois at home. That's 7 games that they're going to have. 6 of those games, and then the Illinois game is actually not at home. It's at Wrigley. They play at Michigan. That's a loss. At Iowa's a loss. At Washington's a loss. At Maryland's a loss. Then you have at Purdue, home against Ohio State. So, yeah, you hold serve at home. You've got a chance to be 6-5 going into that game. I think they've got a shot. Now, look, there's a lot of question marks about that staff. Did they just kind of hit lightning in a bottle last year because of all the stuff? Yeah, sure. Could be true. They have some good players coming back, and I'm gonna stay on that train until I have reason to get off. So I'm gonna buy that. Buy, sell, or hold. 2 current college head coaches will leave for the NFL following the season. I'm gonna sell that. I don't think it'll be 2. I think you may see 1, but I don't think it'll be 2. I'm gonna sell that. I think head coaches still have a lot of reasons to stay in college. I think you're going to see more assistants and coordinators leave. Then buy, sell, or hold. Washington State is a legitimate shot at making the playoffs. Very much a sell. Very much a sell. Just not being in a conference alone is going to kill them. Just being in that Pac-2 playing a bunch of Mountain West teams. No, I don't see it. Now, what I don't know is they're considered one of the group of 5 teams, right? So if they're the highest ranked non-Power 4, then I believe they would be eligible for that spot to be the 5th. Well, no, they wouldn't be. They'd have to be in at large because they can't be considered as part of a conference. I have to look into that one. I'm very curious how the new Pac-2 is going to be treated. Very interested to learn that. Buy, sell, or hold. Florida State being 0-2 by week 1. So obviously, what he's saying is that Florida State this year they play. First week is going to be they're playing in week 0 is what he's saying, and they play Georgia Tech and Ireland. I'm pulling up their schedule now, and then week 2 they play Boston College, or week 1 they play Boston College. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't. No, I'm not. I don't buy them being 0-2. I'm not even sure how that. There's no way they lose to Boston College. No way. I don't think they're going to lose to Georgia Tech, but there's no way they lose at home to Boston College. So I'm selling that. I'm trying to think if I'm missing some angle that I should be thinking about. Buy, sell, or hold. UCF and Gus actually making conference title noise. I'm going to sell that. I mean, they're going to make some noise from the standpoint of they're going to upset somebody, but I don't know if Gus is going to be able to take them to the top of the Big 12 this year. I'm going to sell that one. Buy, sell, or hold. Vince actually being in contention for the IB staff pick'em lead this season. I'm selling that. I'm going to sell that. I got to bust Vince's chops. And then buy, sell, or hold. Hot dogs, hamburgers, and brats. I'm selling that. I can do hot dogs. I can definitely do hamburgers, especially if I'm making them. I'm not a brats guy. It's just not my thing. Not my thing. So I'm selling that. In Irish. So I didn't think I would ask this one. He had said he wasn't sure if I would ask this one, but I think this is a good question or good submission. So I'm going to bring this one up. His first one was, this is 2 of them. First one was, buy, sell, or hold. Either Dallas Golden or Mark Zachary will wind up as a wide receiver instead of on defense by the time their Notre Dame careers are done. I think this is a very fair thing to discuss. Very fair thing to discuss. I don't discuss, is a kid going to decommit? Is a kid going to flip? Is a kid going to commit? I don't discuss that, or not flip, but transfer. I don't like talking about that kind of stuff. But something like this, sure. I think this is good. I'm going to sell it because of what I know of what the Notre Dame staff thinks of them as defensive players. I'm going to sell it. But I think the submission is coming from a wise place because I could certainly see those guys playing there. And I've said before that Dallas Golden would be my number 1 ranked receiver in this class if he was playing wide receiver. Having said that, there's a lot of being made of this receiver class without the context of, hey, folks, let's not forget what they signed the last 2 years. You've got Cam Williams, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Micah Gilbert, KK Smith, and Logan Saldate. That's some pretty good players. They're nowhere near needing that type of transition. And Dallas would be the only one that I would think would do it. Mark Zachary's not going to go there and be that same kind of guy. He's a good football player, but I think they really like him at corner. Then buy, sell, or hold. Within 5 years, the UFL will start drafting players out of high school and drain the talent pool from college football. I'm going to hold on that. I need to do a little bit more research on the UFL's relationship with the NFL and some different things before I'm holding, because I just don't have enough knowledge about it. So I'm going to hold on that one. Some of y'all will probably be mad at me, but I haven't watched a single UFL game. I've been so busy with stuff, I haven't watched a single UFL game. Audric Chestame, one of my favorite names. Buy, sell, or hold. If Notre Dame lands Jaydon Blair, it's not a gap erasing class, but a gap widening class. There's got to be a point where we aren't closing or erasing the gap, but now creating a gap between us and everyone else. I'm going to sell that, because in order to be that, you have to be able to do it over multiple years. I mean, Ohio State didn't start making arguments for being DBU because they had 1 or 2 great years. Same with LSU. It's because they went on stretches of that. Same with when Miami grabbed it back in the 2000s. I mean, Miami has a cornerback room in 2000 that was loaded, and then guys leave, and then the next year they come out and they got backup stepping in the starting lineup who are studs. So I'm not there yet, and especially at safety. I thought they had a really good class. They had a really good player at the top of the class last year. I think Kennedy Urlacher is going to end up being better than a lot of people think. I didn't put this in my intel piece, so I'll give you guys a little nugget. I forgot to put this in my intel piece, but one of the things I've learned from some of my sources is that Kennedy Urlacher is a guy that the staff was very impressed by this spring. And I've already had one source tell me that, like, he was a hit. Like, they got that one right, because they were very high on Kennedy Urlacher, very high. And they love what they saw from him this spring. So, I mean, I like that 1-2 punch. Obviously, you get Jaydon Blair and Ivan Taylor. That's phenomenal. But there still has to be another year of great play and recruiting after this to really say that they're widening the gap. I think what you could very much say is that they've, it's potentially a racing class, but I'm not going gap widening. No. I think we could argue maybe it's definitely closing the gap, maybe erase the gap. I could go there, but widening, no, I can't go there. Need way too much. Way too much. DM ND13, buy, sell, or hold. Texas A&M will win at least 9 games this season. So let me pull up their schedule, because I know it's challenging, but it's not crazy hard. We've gone over this one before. Notre Dame, I have them 0-1. They have McNeese State at home, at Florida, Bowling Green at home, Arkansas on a neutral field, home against Missouri, at Mississippi State, home against LSU, at South Carolina, home against New Mexico State, at Auburn, home against Texas. So, yeah, I'm buying that. I think they're going to be 9-3. I like that one. 9-3 is my prediction for A&M, just quickly looking at their schedule. So I'll buy that. I may change that when I do a deeper dive, but just right now, I'm going to go 9-3. Greg Nielsen, buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame will take both Madden Fair Emo and Nathaniel Usu-Boateng if they wanted to come, even with the existing linebacker commits and numbers. Definitely buy that. Definitely buy that. They would take both. Jay Fish, buy, sell, or hold. The defense registers 40 sacks in the regular season. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to absolutely buy that. So I definitely think that they'll have 40-plus sacks this season. But your question was specific to the regular season. They had 2 years ago, 3 years ago, in Marcus Freeman's tenure, they tied the all-time record with 41. And then they had 40 in the regular season. They only got 1 against Oklahoma State. I think this year will be very close to that. So I'm going to buy that. Jaden Mickey leads the team in interceptions. I'm going to sell that. I think he'll be, but it wouldn't shock me. I'm not selling that with great confidence, but I'm going to sell that because I think it'll be a safety or Christian Gray. And then buy, sell, or hold. Buy one, sell one, hold one of the following. Jaden Greathouse leads the team in receptions. Chris Mitchell leads the team in receiving yards. And Mitchell Evans leads the team in receiving touchdowns. So I'm going to buy Jaden Greathouse leading the team in receptions. Easily buying that. I'm actually going in this holding Chris Mitchell leading the team in receiving yards. He could, but I'm not super confident about it. But I also don't think it's nutty. And then I'm selling that Mitchell Evans leads the team in receiving touchdowns. And I'm very much selling that. I mean, as good as he was last year, he had one touchdown. Mitchell's got to prove to me that he can be a red zone weapon the way that he should be in that instance. And so right now I'm selling that. Wouldn't shock me, but I'm definitely, of those three options, I'm selling that. T-Nac, if buy, sell, or hold, if Notre Dame wins a championship in the next 3 years, they are likely to win another within the following 3 years. So 2 titles in 6 years. I love your enthusiasm, buddy, but I just need to see him win one first. Like, just let me get one, and then we can worry about what comes next. But I just want to get one. Okay, they haven't won a title since I was 10. All right, I'm on the back half of 40s now. I just want to see one. But to your point, I'm holding this one because I need to see them win that first one first. If they do what I think they're going to do, then I think there's a lot to what you're saying. If they can win that one, then that's going to lead to recruiting that leads to another. I could buy that. I will say this. In the era of a 12-plus team playoff, I think repeating and winning multiples is going to be a lot harder. I think doing what Bama did for the 15 years under Saban is going to be virtually impossible. Because, look, let's be honest, Bama caught some breaks. In 2011, Bama caught a break winning a title. They lost at home to LSU and then went out and got a chance to play again in the title game, and I don't think they should have. And then got a rematch win over LSU. They shouldn't have been in that game that year. Oklahoma State should have played LSU in 2011. That's who should have played LSU. And so, you 17, that Bama team in 17 that beat Clemson in the first round and beat Georgia in the semifinal or in the championship game. I don't know if that team's capable of winning another one. 2020 could have done that. 2009 maybe could have done that. 2012 could have done that. 2015 maybe could have done that. It's going to be a lot harder, in my opinion, to win multiple titles in a row and that within this era. But I just want to see one. I just want to see one. Floating Irish, buy, sell, or hold these 3 coaching staffs. So I got to buy one staff, hold another staff, and sell another. The first staff option, Bob Stoops as head coach, Steve Sarkisian at OC, Marcus Freeman at D coordinator. Staff number 2, Pete Carroll as head coach, Lane Kiffin as OC, Brent Venables as D coordinator. And then the third staff, head coach, Urban Meyer, OC, Lincoln Riley, DC, Mike Elko. I'm definitely selling the Lincoln Riley, Mike Elko, Urban Meyer staff. There's a lot of I'm selling that one. But I'm going to hold on the Pete Carroll, Lane Kiffin, Brent Venables one because I like Lane Kiffin a lot. Brent Venables is a proven winner. I mean, I love Mike Elko, but Brent Venables is more proven. Lane Kiffin to me is as an OC has won championships and Lincoln Riley hasn't. And then if I'm looking at the others, Steve Sarkisian's won championships as a coordinator. I think Marcus Freeman's an excellent one, and I love Bob Stoops as a head coach. So I'm going to buy that one. If for me, that would be the one I'd go with. Ryan S. on signing. These are 2 about signing day. These were fun. On signing day, Notre Dame signs 2 top 50 players based on our rankings, IB rankings, who are not currently committed to Notre Dame in the class. I'm going to sell that. I don't think that they're going to assign 2 more top. Well, so you said on signing day. I think any top 50. I think they're going to get 2 more top 50 players on my board, but one of them I think is going to commit well before signing day. So what you're saying is 2 guys they flip or get a guy late. I don't think they're, and that ties into the second one from Darvis. So I'm going to sell that. Darvis is buy, sell, or hold by signing day. Notre Dame flips 2 wide receivers who commit elsewhere. I'm going to sell that as well. I think they're going to maybe flip 1, but yeah, I'm going to sell that. Aiden Benami has got a 4-pack here for me. Buy, sell, or hold. Pat Coogan only sees a lot of playing time due to an injury. I'll sell that because I don't want to root for an injury. So I'm going to sell that. But to your point, do I think Pat Coogan gets beat out? If you were to say, hey, buy, sell, or hold, Rocco Spindler beats out Pat Coogan. I would buy that with a low level of confidence because I'm just not sure that Joe Rudolph's going to be willing to let anyone beat out Pat Coogan. But I hope that happens. That's not a knock on Pat. It's just great kid, tough kid. Just there's other guys with a lot more ability. Buy-seller hold. Michigan is the most delusional fan base in all of America. Well, a year ago, I would have said buy. I would have bought that a year ago, but I can't now. They may be the most obnoxious. They may be the most moronic. They might have one of the biggest clowns in the planet, like as one of their lead, people that cover the team. But delusional. They just went 15-0 and won a national title. So they may suck, but they're not delusional. I mean, what's there to be delusional about? They can win a title. They just proved that they can win a title. So no, I mean, I can't go there at all. Most disliked, sure, but they're not delusional. Buy, sell, or hold. Notre Dame lands Jaydon Blair, Madden Fair Emo, Nathaniel Wusu Boateng, Dylan Robinson, and one more receiver not named. I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy that. As of today, I'm going to buy that. Buy, sell, or hold. 2024 season has the most passing yards in the last 24 years. So 24 years, you have to go all the way back to 2000. I'm going to sell that. And the reason I'm going to sell that is I think they're going to certainly throw for more yards than they have the last couple seasons. And again, I'm going 12+1 in my thought process. But I'm going to sell that because I think this team is going to be so good running the ball, it's going to be hard for them to throw for 4,000-ish yards. It's possible. It's possible, but I'm going to sell that. I think they're going to be a little under. Jay Saxton, 1980. Al Washington will be named one of the top position coaches this year. I could buy that. I could buy that. And then buy, sell, or hold. Al Washington's success this year will propel him to land a 26 class similar to what Mickens landed this year. I'm going to sell that. The reason I'm going to sell that is if Al Washington is named one of college football's top coordinators or top position coaches this year, I don't think he's at Notre Dame next year. I think he's going to get a coordinator job or a head coaching job somewhere. So I'm going to sell that. So I'm going to buy that out because, again, position coaches takes out all the recruiting stuff. Does he develop this? Though it's 2024, I think his D-line is going to be elite, and he'll get a lot of credit for that. Should get a lot of credit for that. But so I buy that. I sell that he'll do that class. Now, okay, let's work with the hypothetical that he stays at Notre Dame. No, I don't. I still sell that because Mike Mickens has put in a ton of work to get there and it has a great strategy and has shown he can carry that strategy out. And now Washington is not. Mike Mickens isn't just having success recruiting because he's had success coaching. He started having success recruiting before he started having great success coaching at Notre Dame. Right? I mean, great success. Yeah, good success, but not he has great success. So I'm gonna sell that. And I believe that's it, everybody. Let me just pull this up and make sure that that's the last one. So that is going to do it for today's buy, sell, or hold. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I had fun with that. Had a lot of fun with that. And so we're going to be back tomorrow with our Thursday show. Going to have a lot of fun. The guys tonight, 5 o'clock, Vince and Sean are going to be there with you guys tonight having a show. I don't know what they're going to talk about. I'm actually getting ready to reach out to them right now. We were talking about they were talking about some things in a group text with me during the show. And so I'm going to find out what they're talking about. So, but hey, I had fun. Hope you guys enjoyed John Garcia being on, talking about recruiting, running back room, buy, sell, or hold. Tons of fun. See you all again tomorrow here on the big show at Irish Breakdown. Tomorrow we'll be back 2 o'clock again. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. If you have not done so, sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. I promise you won't regret it. Support us. Be part of what we're building over there. You will love it. Have an awesome rest of your day, everybody. I will talk to you again after you sign up at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Then you come back tomorrow, and we'll be ready to rock and roll and talk some Notre Dame football. Have an awesome day, and thank you for joining me and John on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.